Hey guys, tonight we're slipping into a world where every button, every feather, every silken fold means something more than just looking good. You close your eyes and imagine the hush of midnight, streets swept with velvet shadows, gaslights flickering on old cobblestone, and in the distance a figure glides by in a cape that billows like a secret. You settle deeper into your pillow as the world outside softens to a hush, and for a moment you can almost feel the weight of a heavy cloak over your own shoulders, the prickle of starched linen, the warmth of a hat pulled low against prying eyes. Tonight's journey won't be a gentle stroll through Parisian boutiques or a polite nod at the runways of Milan. No, this is a sideways trip through the hidden meanings of what people wore, the secret signals stitched in every sleeve and the whispered rules that could make or break you. Sure, you can buy a t-shirt with a funny slogan now, but back then, one wrong scarf, and you could end up with a reputation that haunts your family for generations. You probably won't survive this trip with your dignity entirely intact. But hey, that's part of the adventure. So before we go any further, if this quiet space makes you feel even a little less alone, you can like the video and subscribe, but only if it feels right to your heart. And hey, I'd love to know where you're listening from. Are you lying awake in a quiet room at 2 AM? Or maybe starting your day in a rainy city, eyes still heavy? Drop your time and place in the comments. Let's remind each other we're not alone out here. Now, dim the lights, let your shoulders relax, and let's begin tonight's slow, strange journey. Together, here on Timeless Sleep. You step into a candlelit corridor, your footsteps muffled on the thick patterned rug. In the rooms beyond, people are dressing not just to impress, but to survive, to send signals, to hide, and to boast. A hat is never just a hat here. A cape might mean more than comfort. You might start to wonder what secrets your own pajamas hold, if anyone would recognize your allegiances by the faded superhero on your t-shirt, or if the colour of your socks would get you banished from polite society. The air is thick with the scent of beeswax and lavender water. Someone's pulling on a pair of gloves in the corner, maybe to keep their hands warm, maybe to keep the world at arm's length. You can almost hear the rustle of silk and the clink of tiny fasteners, the soft complaints about tight corsets, and the nervous laughter that follows the snap of a garter. Fashion here isn't just about looking good for a party or standing out in a crowd, it's about protection, protest, belonging, and sometimes, just a little bit, revenge. As you drift through these echoing halls, you might catch a glimpse of yourself in a gilt-edged mirror. Are you the sort to wear a velvet cape, or do you reach for a battered cap, hoping not to be noticed? Every choice matters, and the rules are endless, shifting like shadows as the candle burns lower. You think of the stories tucked into every pocket, every hem stitched with a secret. Why did that young woman hide a letter in her bodice? What message did that nobleman's elaborate buttons send to the king? Historians still argue whether the codes woven into medieval garments were intentional acts of rebellion, or just the happy accidents of fashion-hungry minds. People used to say that clothes make the man, but it's just as true that clothes unmake him too. The wrong coat on the wrong day, and suddenly you're an outcast. A too flashy ring, and you're whispered about in every tavern. Yet in the same breath, clothing could open doors, a certain shade of blue, a certain style of cap, and suddenly you're in with the powerful crowd. This isn't just dress up, it's chess, and every move could be your last. You wander deeper into the past. Maybe you're in London, 1815. The night is cool and you see men bustling by in impossibly tall hats, each one teetering toward the stars. These hats are more than statements. They're a kind of social skyscraper, marking out the peacocks from the pigeons. Further down, a woman's silhouette is a gentle S-curve, tightly bound by laces and bones beneath her dress. It's beautiful, sure, but you feel a little ache just imagining the pressure on your own ribs. Historians still argue whether people truly believed corsets would mould the soul as well as the body, or if it was simply the price you paid for admiration at the assembly hall. The fringe of the crowd is wilder, less polished. Here you might spot someone in a battered cape, patched so many times that it tells its own history, a diary of every scrape and close escape. There's a rumour that inside one hem is a lucky coin, sewn for protection by a grandmother's trembling hands. Some say the most outlandish hats, festooned with ribbons or bird wings, were actually coded messages to lovers or warnings to enemies. You never quite know if the peacock feather is just for show, or a sly wink that says, "Meet me behind the stables after midnight." You can practically taste the intrigue. Clothing becomes a kind of armour. It keeps you warm, yes, but it also shields you from more than the wind. The cloak thrown over your shoulders on a chilly night might double as a shield against nosy neighbours. The lining of a fashionable reticule, tiny and delicate, sometimes hides contraband or forbidden letters. There's an old saying that the best way to smuggle secrets is to make them beautiful. You wonder how many revolutions started with a whisper hidden in a silk glove, or a password stitched into the trim of a skirt. Of course, not every trend is born from practicality. You remember the time you tried on a wildly patterned sweater, thinking it would make a statement, only to realise the statement was, "I got dressed in the dark." The people of the past weren't so different. Some trends lasted only as long as it took for one unfortunate soul to trip on their trailing cloak and bring down half a banquet table. There are legends of entire banquets disrupted by wardrobe malfunctions, like the French noble whose elaborate ruff collar was so stiff he couldn't actually turn his head to greet the king. Still, the truly bold press on. Sometimes the best stories are born of disaster. This is a world built on layers, literal and metaphorical. Take the noblewoman with her dazzling array of ribbons, each one with its own story. Maybe her green sash means she's loyal to a certain cause. Maybe the tiny embroidery at her sleeve's edge is a nod to a forbidden romance. Sometimes the language of fashion is so subtle that only the most observant will catch it. There are secret societies said to use coloured handkerchiefs as calling cards. The right combination, displayed just so, could mark you as friend or foe. Historians still argue whether these signals were universally recognised, or just wishful thinking by hopeful romantics. The rules, as you quickly realise, are endless, and not always fair. In some places, only the wealthy could wear certain fabrics or colours. Imagine the temptation, a bolt of forbidden crimson silk, as alluring as it is dangerous. For many, breaking the rules was worth the risk. There are records of tailors caught smuggling contraband lace, of commoners daring to don the finery of their betters. Sometimes the punishment was a heavy fine, sometimes it was humiliation. In one notorious case, a shoemaker was forced to march through town in nothing but his underclothes, a fate more feared than a jail cell. But fashion isn't just about exclusion, sometimes it's about finding your tribe. Imagine slipping on a battered cap and instantly knowing you'll be welcomed in a certain corner of the pub, or tying your scarf a certain way and being greeted as a comrade by strangers on the street. In a world where survival often depended on quick alliances, clothing became a kind of password. Even today you catch a hint of it. The instant camaraderie of someone in the same band t-shirt, or the silent nods exchanged between those in matching uniforms. The past just did it with more feathers. The weight of expectation is everywhere. You notice it in the careful way a young man knots his cravat, eyes darting to make sure he gets it just right. A misplaced knot, a pattern out of favour, and he might as well declare himself an outcast. Even the colour of a ribbon can spark gossip. In some royal courts, one daring debutante wore a colour so outlandish that whispers trailed her for weeks. Was it a statement of defiance, or just a tragic miscalculation? Historians still debate whether bold choices marked you as an innovator or doomed you to ridicule. The longer you wander, the more you realise every detail matters. The gleam of a brooch, the cut of a sleeve, the height of a heel. Sometimes it's not about comfort at all, but about saying, "I belong here," or "I refuse to belong anywhere." There are stories of rebels who flouted the rules just to see what would happen. One notorious rake wore a woman's bonnet to a masquerade, sparking both outrage and a rash of imitators. Another donned the colours of a rival house, walking straight into danger with a swagger that was either genius or madness. You can't help but smile, imagining the chaos that must have followed. The past is full of these small rebellions, each one a thread in the larger tapestry of history. Sometimes it's a deliberate act, sometimes a happy accident. Remember the tale of the noble who invented a whole new style of sleeve by accidentally catching hers on a door handle? By morning, half the court was clamouring for the same look. There's power in these accidents, these moments when fashion spins out of control and creates something utterly new. Still, beneath the drama, you feel the ache of longing. To fit in, to stand out, to be noticed or left alone, to keep a secret or shout a message in silken lace. Clothing is hope, fear, ambition, and nostalgia, all stitched into one. You wonder, as the candle flickers low, what signals your own pyjamas might send if someone read them carefully enough. Would they guess your hopes, your fears, your quiet longing for adventure on a sleepless night? As you drift, you notice one more thing: the sense of connection. Every hem, every button, every carefully chosen shade is a link to someone else's story. Maybe the woman who hid a lock of hair in her locket, or the boy who tucked a forbidden poem into his boot, or the queen who wore mourning black for a lost love she never spoke of. The echoes are everywhere, in every room, every reflection. Historians still debate how much we can truly know from these traces, or whether we're simply guessing, spinning tales from scraps of cloth and memories faded with time. So you wander onward, through halls lined with velvet shadows, past the rustle of dresses and the gleam of polished shoes, the air heavy with the promise of secrets yet to be uncovered. Every stitch has a story, every garment a hidden meaning. You settle in, ready to uncover them one by one as the night drifts on and the world outside grows soft and distant. You move softly now, the night growing thicker as you drift through lamplit streets and smoky parlours, following the upward tilt of every top hat that bobs through the crowd. The first time you see one up close, it's impossible not to stare. The top hat doesn't just sit, it towers, a small monument perched above its owner's eyes, shadowing their face and drawing every gaze in the room. In this world, a hat is never just a piece of felt. It is ambition, aspiration, a balancing act that says, I am above you, quite literally. There's a strange kind of poetry in the top hat's rise to fame. Before it, men wore tricorns, soft caps, bonnets, none of which made quite the statement that a stovepipe of beaver felt could. You notice how, in portraits, the faces beneath the tall hats seem to have grown more serious, as if the extra inches demand extra dignity. Historians still argue whether the sudden craze for height was about social climbing, or simply a mad scramble to outdo the neighbours, but the effect is undeniable. In a crowd of top hats, you stand out only by standing taller. The first top hats appeared in the late 18th century, though you might hear 100 versions of how it happened. One story claims a London haberdasher named John Hetherington strutted down the street in a prototype so shocking that crowds gathered, children screamed, and one elderly woman fainted dead away. There's a kind of joy in picturing that. An entire city scandalised by an extra few inches of felt and silk. Some say Hetherington was fined for disturbing the peace. Others insist he became a minor celebrity overnight. Whatever the truth, the hat caught on like wildfire. As you walk, you notice how the top hat becomes a character in its own right. It must be brushed, stored, protected from rain. In wealthy households, servants are employed solely to care for these absurdly tall hats, cleaning, reshaping, and guarding them from jealous rivals. You picture the late-night panic of a young clerk whose hat has been squashed on the tram, dreading the next morning's glares at the office. It's more than just a fashion statement, it's a delicate social negotiation. Some hats are covered in gleaming silk, others in the softest beaver fur, a texture so prized that fortunes were built, an entire species nearly wiped out, to feed the demand. The streets are a swirl of movement. Bankers, politicians, young poets with ink-stained fingers, all marked by the tilt and quality of their hats. A scuffed brim might mean a long walk in the rain, a battered crown, a run-in with a rival in a crowded tavern. The elite parade their hats like banners, tall and gleaming, signalling success with every inch. And yet, as you slip past, you catch the nervous glances of those whose hats have begun to show wear. They fuss, rearrange, pat and primp. Because in this world, a crumpled top hat can whisper of poverty and failure. Not everyone is happy with the new fashion. Some see the top hat as a symbol of arrogance, a literal elevation of the wealthy over the working class. Political cartoonists sketch them with exaggerated height, so tall that their wearers teeter and sway, always on the verge of toppling. There are even songs and street ballads mocking the haughty hats, and stories of rowdy mobs knocking hats to the ground during festivals. In some cities, special hat pins and chin straps are sold to keep them in place, both practical and a little ridiculous. And then there are the moments when the hat becomes a shield. You notice a nervous young man dipping his head to hide a blush, the brim shadowing his embarrassment. In a crowded ballroom, a well-timed tilt can conceal a sly wink or a rolled eye. There's a game to it, a silent language of glances and gestures, where a hat can hide as much as it reveals. Some say the custom of tipping your hat began as a way to prove you had nothing to hide, a little bow to show you meant no harm. Historians still debate whether the gesture started as a military salute, or simply as a polite way to say, "I see you." The top hat quickly becomes a mark of occasion. At the theatre, at weddings, at the races. There is no event too grand, no gathering too formal. Some hats are lined with lavender or scented paper, warding off the smells of city life. Others hide love notes or secret tokens under their silk linings, passed between hands with a whispered promise. There are rumours that spies sometimes tucked coded messages inside the hat band. No one would dare search a gentleman's hat. The possibilities are endless, and the stories grow wilder as the hour grows late. You might chuckle to think that there was a time when authorities tried to ban these hats altogether, citing their threat to public order. The tall silhouette blocked the view in theatres, startled horses in the street, and reportedly even caused carriage accidents. In some towns, anxious mayors suggested top hat lanes on busy boulevards, a sort of early fashion segregation. Of course, this only made the hats more popular. People queued for hours to buy the newest shapes, and some even had their hats made taller and taller, until a few unlucky souls discovered that a sudden gust of wind could send the whole thing sailing into the river. You imagine the anxious morning rituals, men standing before the mirror, smoothing their hair, balancing their towering hats and praying for a day free of disaster. Some use hat boxes so large and ornate they resemble miniature coffins lined with satin and secret compartments. If you ever wondered where someone might hide a stolen loaf of bread or a contraband flask, the answer is simple. Look for the tallest hat. Still, the hat is not all fun and games. There are those who struggle under its weight, both literal and figurative. Young boys are given small versions as they enter adulthood, a visible sign that childhood is over. In some families, the passing down of a father's top hat is a ritual, a moment thick with pride and anxiety. Will the hat fit? Will you be able to wear it with the same confidence? There are stories of sons reshaping the brim, lining it with their own initials or secretly padding the crown to make it sit just right. The hat becomes an inheritance, a challenge, and sometimes a burden. The fashion doesn't stand still. Over the decades, hats grow even taller, then suddenly shrink as tastes change. You walk through a sea of black and grey, then see a flash of colour, a daring soul with a cherry red ribbon or a band of tartan. Occasionally a prankster slips a rabbit or two inside a hat, just to see the look on someone's face at dinner. The top hat becomes a stage for tricks, jokes, and magic acts. One famous magician reportedly pulled not just rabbits but entire bouquets, birds, and even a goldfish bowl from his hat. The boundaries between fashion and performance blur, and you can't help but wonder which came first, the hat or the showmanship. And in all this, the hat still serves its main purpose, to mark you out, to show who you are, to tell your story before you say a word. A finely brushed top hat might say, "Prosperous banker." A battered, misshapen one could mean out-of-work poet. Sometimes you see a woman in a man's hat, scandalous in some circles, thrilling in others. The act of borrowing, of swapping hats at a party, becomes its own kind of statement, a gesture that says, rules are made to be broken. Historians still debate whether this cross-hatting was an act of rebellion or simply a bit of late-night fun. The world of hats is not as staid as it seems. There are secret hatters' societies, meeting in smoky back rooms to discuss the newest trends, to swap tips on cleaning and care. Some claim that every town has its own hat code, and outsiders are instantly spotted by the shape of their brims. There's even a tale of a village where top hats are passed from house to house, a symbol of welcome or warning depending on how they're worn. The rules are endless, sometimes inscrutable and always evolving. You start to notice how a whole economy springs up around the hat. Milliners and hatters become local celebrities, their shops filled with the scent of steam and glue, the quiet clatter of wooden forms and iron presses. Some are fiercely protective of their patterns, locking away their secrets at night and only showing their best work to favoured customers. There's a myth that the Mad Hatter was born from the mercury used in felting. Hatters working long hours with dangerous chemicals, their hands trembling, their minds wandering into strange feverish dreams. Even now the phrase lingers, mad as a hatter, just a little off-kilter. In a dark corner you see a hat that is more than just clothing. It is memory. Tucked into the band is a faded photograph, a pressed flower, a curl of a lost lover's hair. For some, the top hat becomes an album, a diary, a vessel for all the things that can't be spoken aloud. There's a gentle tragedy here, a reminder that fashion is always haunted by longing, by absence, by the stories we carry with us. You wander back out into the cool night. Above you, the city's skyline is mirrored by the silhouettes of top hats moving through the mist. For a moment, the hats seem like tiny towers, each one a monument to pride, to hope, to the ceaseless scramble for recognition and belonging. And as you watch the last hats vanish into the fog, you realise that for all their height and drama, the tallest hats only ever bring you closer to the people beneath them, their hopes, their fears, their desperate, beautiful longing to be seen. You drift from shadowy streets and tall hats into quieter, more intimate spaces, dressing rooms and boudoirs where the real architecture of fashion takes shape, bone by bone, seam by seam. The softest candlelight falls across a landscape of laces, hooks and secret ribbons, and you can almost feel the hush of anticipation in the air. Here, undergarments are not merely hidden, they are the silent engineers of every silhouette, the invisible scaffolding that holds up dreams and reputations alike. You reach for a corset, your fingers brushing against tightly woven whalebone and stiff canvas. It is a contradiction in your hands, so delicate, yet almost frighteningly strong. Imagine the ritual. Every morning a woman stands while another person draws the laces tighter, inch by inch, her waist compressed until her breath grows shallow, and her posture is as straight as a cathedral spire. It is a feat of endurance and patience, a practice so regular that people claim you can tell a woman's character by the shape of her stays. Some nights, when no one is looking, she might sneak a finger beneath the edge for relief, longing to breathe as she did in childhood. Mainstream history loves to describe the corset as a tool of control, a way for society to shape women's bodies to match a certain ideal. It's true, in a way. The hourglass figure becomes not just a beauty standard, but a public declaration, disciplined, proper, perfectly contained. The pressure is literal and metaphorical. A small waist is a sign of self-control, of respectability. For some, it's a badge of honour. For others, a daily punishment. And yet, not every wearer submits quietly. There are tales of rebellious young women who loosen their stays as soon as their mothers leave the room, or who swap whalebone for softer materials, hoping for comfort without scandal. Historians still argue whether these little acts of defiance were widespread, or just rare stories passed down because they're so delicious to imagine. In one corner you find a relic of innovation, the first modern brassiere. It's a jumble of straps and silk, not so different from today's designs, and you can't help but marvel at how radical it must have felt in its time. Before the bra revolution, the corset reigned supreme, but as women began to move more freely, biking, working, even fighting for the vote, the demand for flexibility grew. Enter the bra. Easier, lighter, and less restrictive, it changed the way millions dressed each morning. The world never looked back, and yet, like all revolutions, it was not without backlash. Some hailed it as liberation, others as a dangerous step toward immodesty. There's a certain comedy in realizing how a piece of fabric could spark such intense debate. You can picture a 1920s dressing table littered with lace and elastic, perfume and powder. Imagine the giddy freedom of the first time a woman wears a bra instead of a corset. Her movements easier, her lungs expanding. A world is opening up. But the older generation whispers warnings, passing along horror stories of unruly bodies and the dangers of newfangled fashion. Even as the corset slowly fades from daily wear, it never truly disappears. High fashion will revive it again and again, for runways, for royalty, for rebellious designers looking to shock a new generation. Beneath the arguments, the jokes, the scandals, lies the deeper truth. For centuries, the garments closest to your skin are the ones that matter most. They are private, but never truly personal. Even in the privacy of your own room, you dress with society's gaze in mind. Imagine a bride trembling as her mother laces her in for the wedding, each tug a mixture of love and anxiety, of tradition and hope. In some families, a prized corset is handed down, altered to fit each new bride. There are whispers that certain stitches bring luck, or that a bit of blue ribbon sewn into the lining will protect against heartbreak. There's something almost magical about the belief that clothing can shape destiny. In some villages, mothers sew charms or dried flowers into the seams, hoping to guard their daughters from sorrow. More than one young woman is rumoured to have hidden a letter from a secret lover in her stays, pressed flat against her heart. There are stories of coded messages, one knot, two knots, a particular twist of ribbon, signalling everything from political loyalties to a forbidden tryst. Historians still debate how many of these customs were truly widespread, and how many are simply the stuff of gossip and legend. Occasionally you hear tales of tragedy, fainting spells at the opera, broken ribs at the ball, the quiet suffering that comes from years of being laced too tightly. Doctors warn against the dangers, distorted bones, weak lungs, even permanent injury. And yet, for every warning there is a counter-argument. Corsets help with posture, relieve back pain, make you stand tall. The truth, as ever, lies somewhere between caution and pride, discomfort and beauty. Quirky customs abound. In one court it was the fashion for young men to wear faux corsets under their coats, giving the illusion of a perfect figure. There's a story of a mischievous duchess who had her stays embroidered with tiny insults, visible only to the most observant eye. Some say the first push-up effect was invented by a bored seamstress trying to win a bet. And in the oddest corners of Europe, it's rumoured that certain magical folk could curse a corset, making it impossible to remove until a spell was broken. Of course, there are skeptics who roll their eyes at such tales, but every generation has its secrets. The politics of undergarments stretch far beyond vanity. During times of revolution or war, the fashion of the boudoir becomes a quiet battleground. The colour of a ribbon, the length of a garter, these details become loaded, sometimes even dangerous. In one era, red garters signal political rebellion. In another, a blue ribbon marks support for a rival king. Smugglers use the structure of corsets to conceal jewels, letters, even tiny weapons. You wonder how many lives have been changed by something as simple as a hidden pocket or a particularly clever clasp. Modern scholars still argue whether these stories are proof of widespread resistance, or simply isolated incidents amplified by later romanticism. But one thing is certain, the meaning of undergarments goes far beyond comfort. They are a language, a code, a way to say, I am here and I am more than what you see. As time rolls forward, you see the gradual shift from iron discipline to self-expression. By the 20th century, lingerie is everywhere. Advertised, paraded, critiqued, reimagined. Yet the pressure to fit a certain mould remains. Magazine covers, department store displays, whispered advice among friends. The conversation never really stops. One day, you're told to flatten your chest with a bandeau, the next to boost it sky high. The world's idea of the perfect body changes with the season, but the old anxieties remain. Sometimes you have to laugh at the absurdity. Who decided comfort should be so complicated? Beneath all the lace and elastic, a quiet rebellion simmers. Some toss off their bras altogether, proclaiming freedom from the tyranny of the underwire. Others reclaim corsets as a symbol of power, not submission, choosing to wear them as armour, not as cages. Fashion designers riff on old shapes, adding zippers and plastic boning, turning what was once a burden into a playful statement. And every now and then, you see someone wearing a corset on the outside, loud and proud, refusing to be hidden. You remember a story from Paris. A famous artist muse, notorious for her wild spirit, would wear her corset backwards at parties, just to prove she could. The crowd never quite knew what to make of her, but they remembered her long after the music faded. The urge to stand out, to be remembered, to twist the rules just enough, these are as old as fashion itself. Of course, for every rule breaker, there are the guardians of tradition. You picture a stern matron inspecting the fit of her granddaughter's stays, her eyes sharp, her touch gentle but firm. The rituals of dressing are handed down with the wisdom of ages: how to tie a bow, how to hide a stain, how to lace a corset just so. There is love in the details, pride in every careful tuck and fold. And sometimes, the lines between practicality and beauty blur in the most unexpected ways. There's a charming absurdity to the fact that the same garment that once caused fainting fits at court is now the darling of burlesque stages, costume parties, and avant-garde fashion shows. What was once hidden is now revealed, and the world keeps spinning, hungry for the next twist on an old story. As you drift further into this realm, you realise how deeply fashion is woven into the fabric of life itself. The first shy experiment with a new bra, the nostalgia of an old corset, yellowed with age, tucked away in a cedar chest, the whispered advice between friends, the tiny rebellions, the small comforts and even smaller discomforts that shape each day. Historians still debate whether any single moment marks the true liberation of undergarments, or whether it's just an ongoing dance, one step forward, one step back. Tonight, you linger a little longer in the candlelit quiet. You imagine the soft rustle of petticoats, the confident click of a clasp, the faint memory of laughter behind closed doors. Every garment is a story, every stitch, a hope or a heartbreak. And as the world outside grows softer, you hold on to the knowledge that sometimes what's closest to the skin carries the greatest power of all. The night air sharpens, crisp and faintly perfumed with wood smoke, as you slip from the softly lit rooms of lace and whalebone into the echoing silence of the outer corridors, where cloaks, capes, and mantles hang in shadowed rows, each one whispering a different promise. Your fingertips trail along velvet, wool, and sometimes the whisper of silk. A cape isn't just a flourish for a grand entrance or a comfort against cold. It is a curtain, a shield, 1,000 unspoken codes rippling behind every step you take. You swing a heavy cloak over your own shoulders, imagined or real. It settles instantly with a peculiar sense of transformation. It's as if you've been given permission to become someone else, or perhaps to hide the truest parts of yourself. The weight is reassuring. You realise how, for centuries, the simplest cape could grant you the power to vanish from sight or to be instantly recognised, depending on the cut, the colour, and the moment you choose to reveal what lies beneath. Historians still argue whether capes originated as mere protection from rain and wind, or if their dramatic symbolism was baked in from the very first draped hide across a prehistoric back. The truth is, both purposes have always woven together. For a medieval peasant trudging home with a bundle of firewood, a rough woolen mantle is warmth, a bit of armour against the night, and, if pulled just right, a way to slip past the manor without being noticed. For a king, the train of a fur-lined cloak is a declaration. I am untouchable. I am different. My steps must not be heard unless I wish it. In the hush of a cathedral you glimpse another layer. Cloaks and capes are as much about the sacred as the secular. Priests swirl heavy robes as they move through the candlelit choir, gold thread flashing for just an instant. For these men, the robe is a tool, a way to mark out the boundaries of the holy and the ordinary, to remind every worshipper who stands apart, who intercedes. There's a reason the cloak and dagger phrase grew up around secret societies and shadowy deals. The very garment itself implies mystery, intention, hidden purpose. You watch as noblemen stride through a Renaissance feast, their capes patterned in impossible silks, lined in fox or ermine, fastened with ornate clasps the size of a child's fist. But what's more important than the glitter is how the cloak is used. Slung across one shoulder in bravado, drawn tight to conceal a nervous hand, or swept with a flourish to distract from a dagger slipped quietly from a belt. Sometimes a cape is just a cape, but other times it's a stage prop, a smuggler's pouch, a weapon in disguise. One evening in a great hall you notice a guest arriving late. His cape is rain-spattered, longer than fashion demands, and he keeps it wrapped tightly, one arm tucked beneath. Is he hiding a wound, a stolen letter, or just hoping to slip in unnoticed, to pass beneath the radar of gossip and suspicion? There are endless tales of what a man or woman might hide beneath a cloak. Contraband, a flask of strong spirits, even the telltale bulge of a forbidden book. Sometimes you learn the most valuable thing a cape can conceal is fear. Fashionable capes change with the times, each era inventing new ways to say, I belong, or I stand apart. The Spanish capa, worn with elegant pride in the streets of Seville, becomes a statement of romance and dueling bravado. The sweeping Victorian opera cloak is the answer to cold carriages and colder stairs, wide enough to shelter a lady and her secrets, dramatic enough to catch every jealous eye. In the French courts, a single cape might be embroidered with an entire family's history, each symbol a chapter of pride or scandal. You pass a group of young boys in faded, patched cloaks, reenacting legendary deeds beneath a city gate. One pulls his cape tight around his neck, declaring himself invisible to the enemy. Another sweeps his out behind him, hoping to appear larger, braver, untouchable. The psychology is old as time. To wrap yourself in fabric is to step outside yourself for a moment. To become the hero or the villain, or simply anonymous. It's not just children who use capes to play at power. You recall stories from the old cities, where pickpockets and thieves mastered the art of the cloak sweep, using a flick of fabric to distract a mark while nimble fingers went to work. A well-cut cape could hide a purse, a face, a weapon, or an entire change of clothes. In Venice, masked revellers once wore midnight black mantles that swept the ground, transforming a crowd of strangers into a parade of shifting, ghostly shapes. Historians still debate whether the anonymity of the carnival made the city safer, or simply made secrets easier to keep. There's something almost supernatural about the power of concealment. A cloak lets you disappear, but also demands the world's attention if you choose. The swish of a dramatic entrance could hush a room by a moment of silence before the crowd recovers. Actors and magicians rely on this logic, to direct the eye, to hold or release attention, to become more or less than oneself at will. It's no accident that even now the phrase, the mantle of responsibility, lingers. There's an ancient memory in every society that to wear the right cloak is to take on something greater than yourself. Not all cloaks are grand. There's an enduring charm in the humble travelling cape, patched, sun-faded, practical to the core. In every century you find the wanderer whose only home is the garment on his back. Sometimes a whole life story is sewn into the lining. A lucky coin, a stolen button, a faded scrap of ribbon from a childhood friend. In times of crisis, capes become blankets, tents, even bandages. There's a rumour that during long sieges a clever tailor could transform a soldier's cloak into a dozen disguises, outsmarting even the keenest guard. And sometimes a cloak is less about hiding and more about protection. In harsh winters, a cloak drawn close keeps out cold, hunger and despair. You see villagers bundled together on frosty nights, a family huddled under a single patchwork quilt of wool, and you understand that fabric can be a form of love too, shared, handed down, repaired again and again. There are families that measure the years by the stories told as they mended a single beloved cape. Maybe there's a distant cousin who boasts that his father's cloak saved a life during a snowstorm, or a mother who wraps her baby in the same faded mantle that once sheltered her own childhood fears. You start to notice the coded signals too. In some regions, the colour of your cape signals everything from your marital status to your political allegiance. A crimson cloak might mean you are newly married, a black one that you mourn or that you're on official business. There's even an old superstition that the shape of a cloak's clasp can reveal whether a visitor is to be trusted. Round for friends, square for rivals, broken for those who have betrayed their word. Historians still argue whether anyone ever paid attention to these little codes, or if they're just the stuff of stories told on long winter nights. The practical details have a beauty of their own. Fastenings range from twisted cords to silver brooches to intricate wooden toggles, each chosen as much for symbolism as for function. In some courts, the more elaborate the clasp, the higher your rank, or the greater your need to compensate for some other shortcoming. Tailors develop tricks for making cloaks reversible, doubling their usefulness for travellers and spies alike. There's even a record of a famous highwayman who wore a double-layered cloak lined with gold coins, making him almost impossible to capture or harm. Strange tidbits surface as you wander deeper. In 17th century Scotland, it was briefly fashionable for young gentlemen to wear capes lined with thistle leaves, a prickly, uncomfortable gesture of patriotic bravado. There are stories from the Ottoman Empire of soldiers using heavy felt capes soaked in oil as impromptu shields against arrows and flames. In the Russian winter, cloaks are quilted so thickly they stand up by themselves, a silent army of empty shells waiting for their owners to return. Sometimes the drama goes too far. There's the notorious tale of an English lord whose cloak was so long and so heavily embroidered that it caught fire from a careless hearth and nearly burned down the palace. In the aftermath, the length of ceremonial cloaks was quietly shortened by royal decree, though not everyone obeyed. Some say the finest parties of the age were measured not by the brilliance of the guests, but by the number of cloak disasters narrowly avoided. Through it all, the emotional power of the cape persists. Lovers share a single cloak on a rainy walk, hands brushing in the darkness. Rebels gather, faces hidden in the folds of a hooded mantle, sharing whispered plans. A parent wraps a shivering child, and for a moment, the world shrinks to a circle of warmth and hope. The fabric holds more than warmth or style. It becomes a vessel for memory itself. By the time the sun rises, the cloak is folded away, hung neatly or draped with casual disregard. Maybe it bears a new stain, a torn seam, the lingering scent of smoke or lavender. Tomorrow it will be ready again, to conceal, to protect, to announce or to hide. You realise that the stories woven into every cape are as endless as the night itself. Layers of history, comfort, rebellion, and transformation, waiting for someone bold enough to wear them well. A soft hush greets you as you slip away from the world of swirling capes and settle into an age where the power of a hand is not just in what it holds, but in what it wears. Gloves, sometimes buttery soft, sometimes stiff with embroidery, line up on polished wooden trays, waiting for the right fingers. In this dim-lit room, you become aware of your own hands, bare and exposed, and wonder what might have been different if you'd slipped on a pair before entering. Here, a gloved hand is more than warmth or modesty. It is a shield, a badge, a whisper of secret alliances, and the beginning of a silent language. In ballrooms flickering with candlelight, you see dancers' hands brushing, gliding, pausing in elegant gestures that tell stories even when the lips remain sealed. The right glove can elevate a greeting to a promise, or reduce a rival to a nervous wreck. In the rigid world of Victorian manners, an ungloved touch might be as scandalous as a stolen kiss, flesh to flesh, with nothing to mediate the electric current between strangers. Yet beneath the rules there's always a bit of theatre. A lost glove is reason for 100 stories, each more thrilling than the last. A single historical fact lingers at the centre of every gathering. For centuries, gloves were the uniform of respectability. They signified class, cleanliness, and trustworthiness. To offer your hand, gloved, was to promise decency. Remove your glove at the wrong time, and you might accidentally start a feud or worse. In some cultures, to throw down a glove, a gauntlet, was to challenge someone to a duel, a ritual that blended drama, danger, and etiquette in a single motion. You can almost picture a grand hall silenced by the soft slap of leather on marble, eyes wide, breaths held. There's a quirky edge to glove culture too. One French queen was so obsessed with gloves that she reportedly owned more than 24 pairs for every day of the week, each perfumed with a different scent and lined with delicate lace or rabbit fur depending on her mood. Her glove collection was the talk of Europe, sparking wild rumours and nervous envy among the other royals. In England, Queen Elizabeth I's love for extravagant gloves set off a craze that lasted generations, with courtiers racing to outdo each other in pearl-encrusted cuffs and bejewelled fastenings. But gloves were not just for beauty or status. The practical value was never forgotten, especially in cities where the air was thick with soot and streets churned with mud. To keep one's hands clean was to protect oneself from illness and from the suspicion of manual labour, a clear distinction in a world obsessed with hierarchy. In the market, you see shopkeepers slip on worn linen gloves before counting coins, while bankers favour the softest kid leather, ensuring not a fingerprint is left behind. In some regions, a bride's trousseau would not be considered complete without a chest full of gloves, each pair a silent wish for prosperity, luck, and a gentle life. You linger at the edge of a garden party, watching a young couple exchange glances. The woman drops her glove by accident, and the man, careful not to meet her eye, retrieves it with a slight bow. It's a move so well rehearsed that you suspect she has practiced the drop just so. In that moment, 100 things are said: gratitude, invitation, curiosity. If the glove is scented, the perfume lingers on his hand, a private message carried into the rest of the evening. The secret language of gloves could get elaborate. At court, a certain way of folding the wrist might signal boredom. A casual removal of the left glove might mean acceptance of a dance. There are stories of noble women who embroidered tiny symbols on the inside of the cuff, signals for lovers or co-conspirators. In more mischievous circles, gloves might be switched at a masked ball, serving as a token for secret meetings later in the night. Some say entire affairs began with a single misplaced glove. But gloves were also used to exclude. In many places and times, sumptuary laws declared that only the wealthy or well-born could wear certain colours or materials. To break the rule was to court disaster, fines, ridicule, or worse. There are stories of commoners punished for wearing gloves stitched with gold or silver thread, forced to parade bare-handed through the streets as a warning to others. In some cities, glove makers themselves formed powerful guilds, policing style and quality, and even dictating who could wear what and when. In the right hands, a glove was a ticket to a better life, or a reminder of where you belonged. Then there's the glove's power to conceal, not just the hand, but whatever it holds. Spies and thieves favour gloves for hiding ink stains, cuts, or the nervous sweat that betrays a lie. In times of revolution, rebel leaders smuggled notes or keys in hidden pockets sewn into their gloves. During certain royal ceremonies, the presentation of a single glove, white, immaculate, was the ultimate sign of loyalty or surrender. You begin to notice that wherever rules are strictest, rebellion grows most creative. Quirky customs flourished too. In Renaissance Venice, it was said that a well-dressed man never wore matching gloves, one for love, one for luck. In 19th century Russia, fur-lined mittens became so oversized that children joked they could fit an entire family inside. And in Paris, the most fashionable circles competed to see who could commission the smallest, tightest glove, leading to a comical procession of half-circulated hands, some blue at the fingertips, all for the sake of style. Yet the glove's meaning is never static. During times of plague or great fear, gloves become armour, layers of cloth and leather between you and a dangerous world. You think of doctors and apothecaries in heavy gauntlets, treating the sick from behind barriers of boiled leather and wax. A single glove left behind could mean heartbreak too. There are songs and poems about lost gloves, the lonely coachman who discovers a satin glove at midnight, or the widower who keeps his wife's last pair locked away, untouched, for decades. Gloves become tokens, sometimes deliberately left as a challenge or an invitation. In the gambling halls of Monte Carlo, a woman once flung her glove onto the roulette table, declaring her love for the next winner. The gesture lives on, repeated and reimagined in 1,000 stories since. You realise the glove is, at heart, a paradox. It promises protection, yet invites contact. It signals modesty, yet dares you to look closer. It separates and connects, depending on who wears it and how. In the bustling marketplaces of Italy, fingerless gloves become a working-class staple, practical for counting coins, delicate enough for flirting with a baker's apprentice. Among aristocrats, gloves are never just accessories, but a battlefield of etiquette, where one misstep can cost a reputation. Then there's the oddity of gloves worn in sleep, a custom among the very rich and very vain. To keep the hands white and soft, some would slather on almond oil, then don special gloves before bed. In the morning, the gloves would be carefully peeled away, revealing hands untouched by the harshness of daily life. It's a ritual both intimate and absurd, and you can't help but imagine the laughter behind closed doors, the quiet pride in perfectly smooth fingers at breakfast. At coronations and funerals, gloves are loaded with symbolism. White for purity, black for mourning, crimson for loyalty. In some traditions, the exchange of gloves marks the sealing of a bargain, a contract, a truce, even a marriage proposal. The weight of history is stitched into every seam, every fold. And as you trace the evolution of gloves through the centuries, you realise how easily they bridge the gap between private and public, between the self and the world. You wander, hands now gloved in imagination, through a bustling market. Everywhere, stories unfold. A thief caught by the edge of a lace cuff, a lover tracing a secret message onto a gloved palm, a judge passing a sentence with a gloved hand raised high. The rules change, but the tension remains. Historians still debate whether the power of gloves was rooted more in superstition or social necessity, but every gesture carries weight. Every touch is calculated. As dawn approaches, you slip off your imaginary gloves and set them aside, the impressions lingering on your skin. You're left with the memory of countless hands, reaching across centuries, sometimes in greeting, sometimes in challenge, always searching for meaning in the smallest, most ordinary acts. You wander from the delicate etiquette of gloves and into a world where every step you take is a message, every shoe an announcement. Your bare feet imagine the feeling of wooden soles, velvet slippers, and even, just for a heartbeat, the pinch of a too small pointed shoe. Here, the world is built from the ground up, and the history of shoes is a story of survival, status, and silent suffering. The street underfoot changes with each era, sometimes thick with mud, sometimes swept marble, sometimes layered with the muck of 1,000 hurried feet. You notice how every culture adapts to its ground. In medieval Europe, you see pointed polanes, toes stretching out like a magician's wand, curling upwards so extravagantly that they have to be tied to the knee with little golden chains to avoid tripping. The richer the wearer, the longer the point, until city councils begin to complain that doorways are blocked and church aisles impassable. There's a kind of comedy in imagining a crowd of nobles tiptoeing through a cathedral, their shoes so long and unwieldy that they resemble a parade of storks at sunset. Historians still argue whether these wild designs were statements of power or the result of sheer fashion hysteria, but the point remains, shoes tell stories. In the muddy lanes outside the city you find another type of shoe. Clumsy wooden clogs, so sturdy and plain they look indestructible. These are the shoes of farmers, washerwomen and workers. Clogs keep the mud off your stockings, and in a pinch can double as a weapon or a hammer. Sometimes a pair is carved with initials or simple symbols, tokens of love, or perhaps marks of pride for a craftsman's daughter. In Renaissance Italy you step onto a different stage altogether. Here the Chopin rules, the most extravagant of platform shoes, sometimes rising over a foot off the ground. Walking is a high-wire act. The platform is so tall that noblewomen require attendants just to keep their balance. At a grand Venetian festival, you can almost hear the giggles and gasps as a parade of brightly dressed women wobbles and teeters across the square. Sometimes a misstep sends one tumbling, skirts flying, and the crowd erupts in laughter. The taller the shoe, the higher your status, or so they say. But in truth, the woman with the highest chopines is probably the one most desperate to be seen above the crowd. And always, there is the pain. Some say that a truly fashionable shoe should never be comfortable. In 17th century France, heels are so high and narrow that the king himself totters through his palace, trying not to betray his unsteady gait. There's a rumour that Louis XIV had his heels painted red, the better to show off his power and to distract from the awkwardness of walking. You wonder how many secret glances are exchanged over the sight of a nobleman nearly falling flat on his face. Yet for all the discomfort there is pride too. A well-made shoe is a badge of honour for its maker. In a bustling medieval town you see cobblers at work, hammers ringing, leather creaking, the smell of polish and dye. There are stories of master shoemakers who can spot their own handiwork from across a crowded street, each pair marked by a subtle flourish or a hidden stitch. Some shoes are said to bring luck, others to carry curses. In certain towns, old shoes are nailed above the door to ward off bad spirits, or tucked into the walls of new houses for good fortune. It's a tradition that lingers, even as the shoes themselves fall out of fashion. You spot a bride at her wedding, her slippers pale and soft, the soles painted with secret messages from her friends. At midnight she dances until her shoes are nearly in tatters, and there is a moment of laughter as she tosses them into the fire, a ritual for luck, or simply to mark the end of one life and the beginning of another. Sometimes shoes are left behind on purpose. A lost slipper can be a sign, a challenge, a story waiting to be told. Fairy tales spin entire worlds from a single shoe. Among the lower classes, the shoe is a matter of endurance. You feel the ache of walking miles in worn-down boots, the chill of winter seeping through cracked soles. There are tales of peasants weaving straw into their sandals or wrapping rags around their feet for warmth. During famines, a good pair of shoes can mean the difference between survival and ruin. A child with sturdy boots is envied. A father who mends his children's shoes is quietly proud. Yet sometimes the humble shoe carries its own quiet elegance. A row of stitches carefully done, a bit of coloured thread to brighten a dark day. Odd customs surround the world of shoes. In parts of Eastern Europe, a suitor is judged by the quality of his boots. In some towns, new apprentices are shooed in with a ritual march, a bit of teasing, and a drink or two. Superstitions abound. Never put new shoes on a table, never walk barefoot on a wedding day, never wear mismatched shoes unless you want to invite chaos. Some of these rules are practical, some pure whimsy. Historians still argue whether they grew from real fears or just the endless creativity of the human mind. You cross the sea and find other worlds of footwear, In Japan, you slip your feet into wooden gaiter, clacking down stone paths. In Turkey, you see pointed slippers embroidered with gold and jewels, each one a declaration of artistry. Even the poorest child in the bazaar dreams of red shoes sparkling in the sunlight. There are sandals worn by the pharaohs, boots built for the endless Russian steppe, moccasins soft as a whisper, moccasins that tell the story of the forest in every stitch. Across the globe, shoes are memory, identity, invention. But wherever you walk, you see the same dance. The wealthy compete to outdo each other in extravagance. The poor find clever ways to make do. Sometimes the lines blur. A cobbler's daughter catches the eye of a young nobleman, her shoes shining from hours of careful polishing. There are stories of girls who paint their shoes with leftover dye, hoping to pass for rich at the harvest festival. A single night in the wrong shoes can make or break a reputation. Some say the first sneaker was just a worn-down slipper, repurposed for a midnight escape. In the marketplaces of Paris, shoes become currency. The right pair can open doors, the wrong one can slam them shut. There are rumours of secret shoe societies, bands of apprentices who swap patterns and tricks, always on the lookout for the next big trend. A clever merchant might pass off cheap shoes as imports from Venice or London, hoping to fool the fashion-hungry crowds. And in royal courts, shoes are delivered in secret, sometimes smuggled in under cover of night, to avoid the jealous eyes of rival courtiers. Of course, shoes have their dangers. In some times and places, to wear shoes at all is to invite suspicion. Rebels and outsiders go barefoot as a sign of defiance. In one village, the barefoot parade is a protest against taxes. In another, a young woman who dares to appear shoeless at church is branded as wild, even dangerous. Shoes, like so many things, are never just what they seem. Sometimes shoes are a source of comedy. There are stories of lords so obsessed with their new boots that they wear them to bed, only to be mocked by their servants in the morning. In Vienna, a famous composer supposedly composed an entire waltz, while breaking in a new pair of shoes, every note accompanied by a wince or a laugh. In England, children play at cobbler's catch, tossing shoes across the yard and shrieking when someone is hit. The shoe is as much a toy as a tool, as much a symbol as a necessity. The dark side of fashion surfaces too. In China, the painful practice of foot binding turns shoes into objects of torture. Tiny slippers meant to reshape the body itself. Even in the West, heels grow taller and narrower, sometimes leading to injury or even deformity. Doctors warn of the dangers, but style marches on. Historians still debate whether these trends were driven by men's demands or women's desire to stand out, or perhaps a little of both. You begin to notice how shoes mark out the seasons of life. The sturdy boots of a child, the ceremonial slippers of a bride, the heavy shoes of a mourner walking in procession. In some cultures, the dead are buried with their best shoes, ready for the journey to the next world. Old shoes are thrown after carriages for luck. Shoes are hidden in chimneys, hung over doors, given as gifts to mark every milestone. Every culture finds a way to make the ordinary extraordinary, to turn the act of walking into a ritual of hope and memory. As dawn creeps in, you rest your feet, feeling the echoes of 1,000 steps beneath you. Each shoe, each boot, each slipper is a quiet testament to invention, ambition, and sometimes a little foolishness. You marvel at the idea that something as simple as a shoe can hold so much history, so much longing, so much pride and pain. And as you close your eyes, you know that wherever you wander, you're always walking in the footsteps of those who came before. You slip from the busy markets and the clatter of shoes, stepping quietly into a world where the right to cover your head, or not, can mean everything. Hats, hoods, and forbidden crowns dangle from pegs in dimly lit entryways and grand halls alike, each shape telling its own story. In this space, you notice how quickly a simple piece of headgear can shift your place in the world. You watch, invisible, as people reach for their hats, pausing for a heartbeat to check the tilt, the feather, the angle that might tip their fortunes in one direction or another. The air around you is charged with the power of hats. A bishop's mitre, impossibly tall and gilded, sweeps past you in a solemn procession, its every angle meant to inspire awe. At the same time, a child in a ragged cap darts through the crowd, vanishing into the shadows before the weight of grown-up rules can settle on his small shoulders. Hats are never just protection from sun or rain here. They are authority, rebellion, belonging, and danger, sometimes all in the same breath. For centuries, sumptuary laws ruled who could wear what. In medieval Europe, only the nobility were allowed certain fabrics and shapes. The wrong hood on the wrong head could mean a swift punishment, a fine, a beating, or worse. You sense the tension as you watch a tailor stitch a forbidden colour into a hatband, his hands trembling, hoping not to be discovered by the city guards. Historians still argue whether these laws truly kept people in line, or whether the thrill of breaking them just made the forbidden hats more desirable. Hats ignite tempers. You hear stories of entire towns upended by hat riots, crowds marching through the streets, protesting taxes or new rules that ban their favourite styles. In one city, a lord's decree that only the wealthy may wear wide-brimmed hats leads to chaos. Apprentices and merchants parade through the market in towering headgear made of straw and old rags, mocking the nobility with every lopsided step. There's something irresistible about the idea that fashion can spark revolution, that a feather or a velvet brim can become a battle cry. The danger isn't always in what you wear, but in what you refuse to remove. A hat left on indoors can mean insolence. Refusing to bare your head before a king, a priest, or a judge is a challenge to their authority, a statement that you answer to no one. In the courts of Europe, a page boy might be punished for leaving his cap on too long, while in a smoky tavern, the same act could earn a sly nod of respect. There are layers to the rules, and sometimes it seems the only way to keep track is to watch and copy, hoping not to stumble. You follow a procession through a narrow city street. Women's hoods are elaborate, trailing veils and ribbons, sometimes hiding half their faces. The hennin, a tall pointed hat like something from a fairy tale, rises above the crowd, the symbol of high status and even higher risk. Some claim the hennin was inspired by distant lands, a mark of cosmopolitan sophistication. Others say it was designed simply to keep men guessing what lay beneath the veil. There's a touch of the ridiculous in these towering creations, but also a fierce pride. In the wrong hands, though, such hats can turn dangerous. There's an old tale of a jealous rival tipping a hennin just as its wearer bows before the queen, sending it tumbling to the ground and sparking a scandal that lasts for months. Sometimes, a hat is all you need to be seen, or not seen at all. A wide-brimmed felt hat shields a face from prying eyes, while a deep hood allows a traveller to pass unremarked. Monks and scholars wear simple caps as signs of humility, while young men in the city sport elaborate plumes and cockades, each one a signal to friends and foes alike. In one corner, a group of revolutionaries gather, their matching hats a sign of unity. In another, a poet tucks a quill behind his ear, the feather as much a statement as any written verse. The head becomes a billboard, the hat its ever-changing advertisement. There are stories of forbidden crowns too. In some kingdoms, only the royal family may wear a circlet of gold or even certain arrangements of flowers. To break this rule is treason. You imagine the thrill, the terror, of a commoner daring to don a crown even for a moment. The punishment, if caught, can be swift and severe. Yet every so often, a new king or queen will secretly gift a crown to a loyal servant, a lover, a child, as if to remind the world that power, at its heart, is just a game of symbols. Odd rituals abound. In some villages, hats are passed from hand to hand in a silent game of luck. Whoever is left holding the hat at midnight is crowned fool for the year. A role filled with both laughter and responsibility. Elsewhere, hats are tossed into the air to celebrate weddings, births, or the end of a successful harvest. You hear of a remote monastery where novices must weave their own hoods from scratch, each mistake a lesson in humility and patience. In the grand halls of Paris, the hat becomes a weapon of wit. Ladies design hats so wide they block rivals from view, sparking whispered wars of flowers and feathers. You sense the emotional charge attached to hats. In moments of grief, mourners don black veils or plain caps, lowering their heads in silent tribute. At coronations and weddings, hats explode with colour, each more elaborate than the last. In the muddy lanes after battle, soldiers gather the hats of the fallen, each one a memory, a debt to be honoured. Even in death, a hat may accompany its wearer, placed gently atop the coffin, or burned on a pyre as the ultimate farewell. Sometimes the hat is a form of protest. During hard times, the poor might wear their hats indoors, refusing to show submission. At the height of the French Revolution, red Phrygian caps become the mark of freedom, worn by those who would see the old order swept away. Historians still argue whether fashion drives politics, or if it's the other way around. But in moments of great change, it is often the hat that signals which side you are on. You pass through a rowdy tavern and notice a new tradition. At closing time, everyone flings their hats onto the rafters, hoping for good luck. The next morning, apprentices climb ladders to retrieve them, sometimes swapping, sometimes leaving one behind as a joke. There's a warmth to the ritual, a reminder that even the most serious fashion has its lighter side. You hear too of the darker side of hat culture. In some eras, head coverings are used to mark out those considered other. A yellow hat for outsiders, a blue cap for servants, a ragged hood for those who cannot pay their debts. There's pain in the memory, a reminder of how fashion can be used to wound as well as to welcome. Yet, even here, people find ways to subvert the rules. A servant might tuck a bright ribbon into his cap, a secret message to those in the know. A debtor may shape his hood just so, thumbing his nose at the world even as he bows his head. Over time, the fashions shift. Stiff bonnets give way to floppy berets, iron crowns to delicate circlets of flowers or wire. Yet, the symbolism never fades. The act of doffing a hat in greeting, of tipping the brim to a friend or stranger, becomes a ritual of connection, a way of saying, "I see you." In some towns, hats are blessed by priests or rabbis, believed to ward off evil. In others, new parents tuck a baby's first cap away in a box, a memory of beginnings. The most curious tidbit lingers in a quiet corner. In 18th century London, hatters' clubs gather in smoky back rooms to exchange stories, swap designs, and vote on the next season's trends. The most outrageous idea wins a round of drinks, and sometimes a brief flash of fame on the city streets. In Italy, a rumour spreads that a hat worn inside out brings luck, and soon, daring youths parade through town, hats reversed, daring fate to do its worst. As the candle burns low, you notice how the boundaries between hats, hoods and crowns begin to blur. Each is a signal, a shield, a dream of something more. Whether you wear your head high or low, your choice says something to the world and to yourself. You leave this room with a sense of possibility, a quiet understanding that the right hat at the right time can change everything. You drift onward from the parade of hats and hoods, following the subtle sway of skirts and the glint of tiny clasps, drawn into the intricate world of pockets, reticules, and the hidden things people carry. Here, the true stories are not on display but secreted away, in silk linings, velvet pouches, and clever folds that guard everything from coins to confessions. As you enter this world, you sense that what is hidden sometimes tells more than what is shown. The first thing you notice is that, for much of history, real pockets, the kind sewn into garments, deep enough to hold more than a hope and a wish, were a luxury, even a small act of rebellion. Men's clothes bristle with them, greatcoats with cavernous interiors, waistcoats with neat watch pockets, breeches with secret slits. You slip your hand into an imaginary coat and feel the comfort of something tucked safely away. A coin, a letter, a crumb for the journey. For women, though, pockets are another story altogether. For centuries, women's garments are stubbornly, infuriatingly pocketless. You watch as a young woman ties a soft pouch, a pocket in name only, around her waist, slipping it beneath the layers of her skirt, invisible but always present. This is the tie-on pocket, worn close to the body, accessed through a carefully hidden slit in her gown. In it she hides keys, coins, a thimble, maybe a love note or two. Historians still argue whether this was an act of convenience or a subtle way for women to keep secrets in a world determined to keep them exposed. Pockets are small, but their presence, or absence, changes everything. You see a grandmother quietly slipping an apple into her hidden pouch for her grandchild, a merchant's wife keeping track of the week's earnings, a child tucking away a stolen treat. Sometimes, a pocket is the only place a person's true self survives the scrutiny of society. There's a story from revolutionary France of women smuggling pamphlets in their pockets, risking arrest for the chance to spread a message. The simple act of reaching into your own pocket in public is sometimes enough to draw suspicion. Of course, there are risks. A loose pocket can be cut away by a nimble pickpocket. In the crowded markets of London or Paris, thieves master the art of slicing the string, letting the pouch slip quietly to the ground and vanish before its owner notices. Street children boast of their skills, swapping stories and techniques behind dusty stairwells. There are even tales of dueling pickpocket gangs, each with its own code of honour. The city is a jungle and your pockets are always fair game. The reticule arrives on the scene, a tiny beaded purse delicate as a secret. When women's fashions change at the turn of the 19th century, skirts grow slimmer and there's nowhere left to hide a tie-on pocket. Enter the reticule, small, pretty and always visible. You see women at parties clutching these little bags, the beads catching candlelight. The contents are mystery to everyone but their owner. What do they hold? A folded handkerchief, a glass vial of perfume, a letter from a friend, or a lover. There are whispered jokes that the smaller a woman's reticule, the more dangerous her secrets must be. There's even a story that one clever lady smuggled an entire parakeet into a ball concealed in a reticule lined with lace and scraps of cake. But not everyone is pleased. Some grumble that the loss of the pocket is a loss of freedom, that women's new dependence on visible purses makes them vulnerable, forced to guard their secrets in plain sight, never able to slip a hand into a hidden fold for comfort or confidence. There are debates in magazines and drawing rooms. Should a lady's possessions be on display? Is the reticule a step forward or a retreat? The answer, as always, is complicated. Some women cleverly sew hidden pockets into their underskirts or sleeves, refusing to give up the right to keep something for themselves. Men's pockets are not without their own drama. The rise of the waistcoat brings with it the fob pocket, perfectly sized for a watch and chain, a status symbol as much as a convenience. In some circles, the way a man draws his watch from his pocket becomes a ritual, smooth, practiced, meant to impress. There are rumours of secret pockets built into gentlemen's hats, allowing for a quick escape with jewels or notes should the night turn dangerous. In rougher quarters, thieves cut open seams looking for hidden treasures, sometimes finding only crumbs and old receipts. Pockets are places of longing and loss too. You hear stories of soldiers on the front carrying tiny tokens from home, a lock of hair, a pressed flower, a picture worn thin from touch. There's the widow, who keeps her late husband's handkerchief in her apron pocket, taking it out to press to her face in the quietest moments. In the letters of poets and lovers, pockets become metaphors, places where hope is hidden, where sorrow is kept safe, where dreams travel secretly through the world. You find odd traditions everywhere you look. In rural England, it's considered lucky to sew a coin into a child's first pocket, to ensure prosperity. In some towns, pockets are embroidered with charms or protective symbols, meant to keep away thieves or bad luck. There's a superstition that turning a pocket inside out will reverse your fortunes, sometimes for better, sometimes for worse. Historians still debate whether these customs are based in ancient magic or simple practicality. Sometimes the humble pocket is a tool of survival. During wars and famines, people carry food, medicine and letters across borders, trusting their lives to what they can hide on their person. In times of peace, Pockets are filled with the detritus of daily life, scraps of poetry, lucky stones, faded ribbons. There are stories of women who carried tiny bottles of ink and paper, ready to jot down recipes or love notes at a moment's notice. For some, the contents of a pocket are the only possessions they own. Quirky tales abound. There's a legend of a Parisian actress who kept a live mouse in her pocket for luck, releasing it on stage at just the right moment for maximum chaos. In 19th century New York, a society lady designs a pocket ball gown with dozens of hidden compartments, dazzling her friends by producing trinkets and sweets all evening. And in the wild markets of Istanbul, a peddler's vest bristles with tiny pockets, each one home to a different kind of spice. Sometimes what's hidden turns out to be more valuable than what is displayed. In the palaces of St. Petersburg, diamonds are sewn into secret pouches to avoid taxes and thieves. There are stories of resistance fighters sewing maps into their coats, escaping prison with only what they can carry next to their skin. In every era, those who are clever with pockets seem to have the upper hand. You notice too how pockets become a battleground in the endless dance between practicality and fashion. Designers argue, seamstresses mutter, tailors protest. Why should form trump function? In some decades, the return of the pocket is greeted with cheers. In others, it vanishes again, replaced by purses, bags, or simply empty hands. There's a joke that fashion designers are terrified of pockets, that they make clothing too useful, too independent. In protest, some women take to sewing their own, a quiet revolution in every stitch. There are moments of comedy, as always. A gentleman at a ball searches frantically through his pockets for a misplaced dance card, only to find a piece of cheese instead, a relic from an earlier picnic, now much the worse for wear. In the countryside, children turn their pockets inside out to display a collection of stones, feathers and bugs, much to their mother's dismay. Even in the most sombre moments, someone's pocket will give up an odd treasure, a reminder that the hidden things in life are sometimes the most surprising. As you wander deeper, you sense how the smallest spaces can contain the greatest mysteries. Pockets, reticules, and hidden folds are never just about storage. They're about identity, safety, longing, and defiance. Whether tucked close to the skin or dangling from a delicate wrist, they are the quiet keepers of history, the secret heart of every garment, beating softly against your side as you walk through the world. And in the end, you realize what we choose to hide often tells more than what we dare to reveal. You linger in the soft glow of hidden pockets, the secrets of reticules still humming at your side, and suddenly the world seems to flood with colour. Everywhere you look, cloth burns bright. Saffron, crimson, indigo, gold, each shade a signal, a code, sometimes a challenge, sometimes a warning. Tonight, you follow the thread of colour, not just as decoration, but as a language all its own, woven into every fold and seam. Your eyes adjust to the wild variety. In the market square, a young woman swirls in a gown dyed the deepest blue. She knows what she's doing. That colour, once reserved for queens, shouts status to anyone with eyes to see. You watch merchants argue over the price of imported dyes, their hands stained from a lifetime of work. Here, colour isn't just an aesthetic choice, it's economics, politics, even survival. A bolt of purple silk on a shop counter could cost a fortune, a fact known by every would-be social climber who ever dreamt of draping themselves in royal hues. The meaning of colour changes with time, with place, and with power. In ancient Rome, the coveted Tyrian purple, extracted painstakingly from thousands of tiny sea snails, was a privilege for emperors and senators alone. To wear it without permission was a dangerous game, punishable by law. You picture a rebellious merchant daring to line his cloak with a narrow band of forbidden dye, the rush of fear and thrill in every step. Historians still argue whether these rules truly kept the lower classes in their place, or whether the endless cat and mouse chase between law and vanity just made colour all the more seductive. Some colours come with danger woven right in. In the 18th and 19th centuries, Paris green becomes the height of fashion, a bold, poisonous hue derived from arsenic. Gowns, ribbons, even wallpaper glow with this bright green, the envy of all. But beneath the glamour lies a darker truth. Factory workers sicken, wearers faint, even the air at the ball shimmers with invisible threat. You imagine the sharp-eyed hostess watching for a guest to swoon, just as much from style as from the fumes rising off her dress. There's a strange joke in knowing that sometimes, to look alive, you have to risk a little death. The language of colour is never just for the elite. In every crowd, every season, you notice how people use shade and pattern to send signals. During a time of plague, yellow becomes the mark of the outcast, the sick, the foreign, the feared. Scarlet cloaks single out sinners and debtors, while white marks the pure, the untouched, or the mourned. There are tales of whole communities changing their dress overnight, shifting alliances and fortunes with a dip in the dye vat. A single blue ribbon tied at a wrist might mean loyalty to a rebel cause. A red sash at the waist is a signal to look twice, to listen closely, to be wary of what's unsaid. Odd traditions flourish. In parts of West Africa, intricate patterns and colours tell the story of entire families, each dye a marker of age, marriage, triumph or loss. In Scotland, tartans blaze with clan pride, the colours mapping out allegiances that go back centuries. You hear of brides hiding sprigs of green in their bouquets, a nod to old fertility rituals, or of children wearing yellow sashes to ward off evil spirits. There are superstitions that certain dyes protect against illness, that wearing the wrong colour on the wrong day can invite disaster. Some of these stories are half remembered, half invented, but all of them are lived. Colour is rebellion too. In the France of the Sun King, a group of artists adopts black as their symbol, flouting the pastel confections of the court. In England, the mauve measles sweeps the nation, as a new synthetic dye lets the masses copy the purple of their betters, much to the horror of the upper crust. There's always a counter-movement, a protest against the rules. Sometimes the forbidden colour appears in a lining, a ribbon, or a flower tucked into a hat. Sometimes it's a full-blown riot, a crowd surging through the streets in matching red kerchiefs, daring the authorities to stop them. The chemistry of colour is a kind of magic. You slip through a workshop breathing in the acrid tang of lye and cochineal beetles, the sweet rot of fermenting indigo, the dizzying reek of boiling urine, for the strongest yellows. Dyers are alchemists, keepers of secrets passed from hand to hand. Sometimes they jealously guard their formulas, other times they pass them to daughters and sons, to apprentices and lovers. There are stories of entire fortunes won and lost on a new shade, of sudden disasters when a batch goes wrong and a precious bolt of silk turns muddy and useless. Yet there is play too. Children in the countryside mash berries into crude paints, staining their lips and cheeks in imitation of their mothers. Artists and tailors conspire to blend the unblendable. Striped stockings, checked waistcoats, patchwork cloaks that announce creativity or madness depending on the angle. In some cities, festivals explode in colour. Holi in India, Carnival in Brazil, each costume a riot of hue. You notice the joy that comes with a burst of yellow, the hush that falls with morning black, the gasp that follows a bride in dazzling white. Sometimes the wrong colour spells disaster. There are tales of ambassadors offending entire courts by misreading the palette, arriving in mourning black when joy is expected, or wearing festive red to a funeral. In certain places, a single thread out of place is enough to mark someone as an outsider. There's a quiet heartbreak in these moments, a reminder that every colour is a test, a question. Do you belong? Do you understand? Do you dare? You pause at a country wedding, watching as families trade ribbons and sashes. The groom's kin tie blue cloth around his arm, a pledge of loyalty. The bride's mother tucks a strip of green into her daughter's shoe for luck. Later, as the sun sets, everyone dances beneath streamers of every shade, the whole village woven together by colour, at least for one night. Historians still debate whether these rituals are the remnants of older pagan rites. or simply the inventions of people looking for magic in a complicated world. A fringe tale flickers into view. In one 19th century city, a notorious outlaw dyes his cloak a lurid yellow so he'll be recognised and avoided at every turn. In Venice, gondoliers compete to wear the brightest sashes, turning the canals into a living rainbow. There's a rumour that a clever merchant once disguised herself as a beggar, using dirty, colourless rags to move unnoticed through a city locked down by plague. You marvel at how the absence of colour can be as powerful as its presence, how the drab and the dull sometimes protect better than the dazzling. You see how colour becomes a code for hope. During times of war, entire populations wear scraps of red or white to show resistance. In the darkness of occupation, a tiny blue ribbon in a child's hair is a quiet signal. We're still here. In cities divided by faith or politics, a sash or scarf marks you as friend or foe. And in quieter times, a splash of bright yellow or green is simply a sign of spring, a promise that winter's grip is loosening at last. Sometimes colour is pure invention. The new chemical dyes of the 19th century bring impossible colours within reach of everyone. Suddenly mauve, magenta and emerald sweep across fashion like a fever. The elite sniff at the democratisation of luxury, but the crowds love it. Street vendors hawk ribbons in every hue. For the first time, the poor can afford to dream in colour, and the city lights up with new possibilities. There are hiccups, of course. The first magentas fade in the sun, some dyes stain the skin, others turn brittle with rain. The price of beauty is always a little unpredictability. You hear laughter too. Children tease each other for wearing clashing colours, or for picking the wrong shade at market. Tailors boast of inventing new patterns, daring the world to keep up. Sometimes, a colour trend is born from accident. A spilled pot of dye, a bolt of cloth left too long in the sun, a bargain batch from a distracted merchant. Historians still argue whether the rise and fall of colours follows deeper social currents, or whether fashion simply likes to surprise itself. You end your walk as dusk settles, the colours fading to grey and blue. Even in the dark, the memory of colour lingers, a language older than words, more subtle than most people notice. You wonder, as you curl beneath your blanket, what shade tomorrow will bring, and what message you'll send to the world when you get dressed, whether you mean to or not. You step lightly from the whirl of colour, letting the brightness fall away, and move toward a world where the shape of clothing means order, duty and, sometimes, power, the realm of uniforms. Here, what you wear is not only a matter of taste but a sign of allegiance, authority, or resistance. In the hush before dawn, you listen to the rustle of heavy cloaks, the jingle of brass buttons, the unmistakable thump of boots lined up in perfect rows. You realise that a uniform can make you anonymous, or unforgettable. Uniforms are everywhere, once you know how to look. They stand at the gates of ancient cities, march across fields in dusty columns, cluster around the tables of guilds and secret societies. Soldiers, nuns, doctors, footmen, students, even executioners, each is marked out by a distinct pattern, colour or emblem. You see the pride in a soldier's polished buttons, the quiet gravity in a nurse's starched apron, the nervous anticipation in a student's first cap and gown. In every place, uniforms draw the boundaries of belonging and exclusion. The first uniforms are often simple: a coloured sash, a matching cloak, a badge stitched to a sleeve. In ancient Rome, legionaries march in identical tunics and armour, their red cloaks a moving river of authority. You hear the snap of a centurion's order, feel the weight of the helmet pressing down, the certainty that as long as you wear the right colours, you are part of something larger than yourself. But even here, there are tricks and cheats. Recruits swap pieces to avoid punishment, tailors secretly reinforce seams for favoured officers, and the cleverest soldiers stitch lucky charms beneath the lining, small acts of individuality in the sea of sameness. You walk through medieval towns where guilds parade in bright regalia, each trade marked by a special colour or emblem, the fishmongers in blue, the bakers in white, the cobblers in yellow. Guild uniforms do more than signal profession. They are tickets to security, protection and pride. But the system can be rigid. In some cities, to wear a guild's uniform without permission is punishable by exile or worse. Historians still argue whether such strict dress codes created real unity or just deepened the divisions between those inside and outside the system. On the battlefields of Europe, the meaning of uniforms grows even more fraught. Red coats signal British infantry, blue jackets mark the French, while Prussians and Russians invent their own colour codes. You see generals fretting over the visibility of their soldiers, the risk of being targeted, the endless competition to stand out or blend in as war demands. Sometimes, the uniform becomes a liability. During the American Revolution, colonists start to mimic the look of British troops, using captured coats and hats to sneak past enemy lines. There are tales of spies swapping buttons and epaulettes, creating confusion and chaos wherever they go. Sometimes the rules of uniform are inverted on purpose. The French revolutionaries famously discard their livery, adopting the simple sans culotte style. Plain trousers, jackets, and red caps, an act of both political defiance and practical necessity. On the other side of the world, samurai warriors don elaborate armour for battle, but dress in near-identical black robes when gathering for secret meetings, signalling unity and equality. In both cases, uniformity is a tool, a way to erase difference or to amplify it. Quirky stories surface wherever uniforms appear. In Victorian England, a railway company tries to improve discipline by issuing elaborate new hats, so unpopular that staff toss them into the river, where locals fish them out and wear them as a badge of defiance. At Oxford, university students are required to wear full academic dress for even the most minor exams, leading to a lively underground trade in borrowed gowns and forged cap tassels. And in the palaces of Istanbul, the Sultan's bodyguards compete to see who can invent the most flamboyant uniform, each year's winner parading before the court in a riot of feathers and embroidery. Sometimes a uniform is protection as much as proclamation. The white coat of the doctor, the black robes of a judge, the apron of a baker, each one says, "I have a role. I am to be trusted." In a world of uncertainty, uniforms become shorthand for competence, authority, or kindness. But there is danger too. Imposters and swindlers learn to mimic the uniform, using borrowed symbols to cheat and deceive. There are tales of thieves dressed as priests, spies as milkmaids, assassins as royal guards. Historians still debate whether the rise of the uniform truly made the world safer, or just offered new ways to break the rules. The emotional impact of the uniform is deep and complicated. For some, it is a source of pride, a dream fulfilled, a mark of belonging. For others, it is a straitjacket, a constant reminder of conformity and control. You watch a young woman button up her nurse's smock, her hands trembling with hope and fear. You see an old soldier polish his medals in the quiet of evening, remembering friends lost and battles survived. In some families, uniforms are heirlooms passed down and treasured. In others, they are reminders of pain and loss, carefully hidden away. Odd customs linger in the world of uniforms. In certain European armies, soldiers are forbidden to remove any part of their uniform in public, even in the hottest summer. In remote monasteries, monks embroider prayers into their habits, invisible except under candlelight. In a handful of African kingdoms, warriors wear elaborate masks and cloaks, believed to summon ancestral spirits to their aid. There's a story from 17th century China of a magistrate who wore a robe so heavily embroidered with dragons that he could hardly move, an unmissable statement, but hardly practical for work. Uniforms aren't just for the battlefield or the court. In ordinary life, school children line up in matching blazers, their sense of self both sharpened and softened by the sameness. Sports teams don their colours and badges, the pre-game ritual of putting on the kit, as meaningful as the game itself. Even in the modern workplace, uniforms persist. The chef's white, the pilot's epaulettes, the hotel bellhop's gleaming buttons. Each carries echoes of tradition, pride, and sometimes gentle mockery. the knowing wink of a waiter adjusting his tie, the whispered jokes behind a bus driver's cap. Rebellion simmers under the surface. In the factories of the Industrial Revolution, women add coloured ribbons to their uniforms, breaking the monotony. Prisoners secretly swap parts of their uniforms to confuse the guards. Sometimes, an entire workforce goes out of uniform in protest, hanging their aprons or hats from windows as a sign of dissent. There are stories of workers forced to wear humiliating uniforms as punishment, only to reclaim the garment as a badge of solidarity. Historians still argue whether uniforms empower or oppress, but everyone agrees. What you wear on the outside changes how you feel on the inside. The uniform can even become a shield against grief or fear. In hospitals and disaster zones, teams don matching vests or jackets, drawing courage from the shared colour and insignia. During wars, resistance fighters sew patches onto their clothes, sometimes nothing more than a coloured scrap, but enough to bind them together. There's a story from the Second World War of children in hiding who invent their own uniform, armbands made from rags, a tiny gesture of belonging in a world turned upside down. You notice too how the absence of a uniform can be a statement. In some revolutions, the first act is to strip away the old colours, to walk bareheaded and plain-clothed through the streets. In art and music, creative types often reject uniforms entirely, choosing wild patterns, ripped jeans, or no shirt at all as a rejection of conformity. Yet, even here, there is a kind of uniformity, the look of the outsider, the code of the rebel. Sometimes the uniform is simply invisible, a set of rules everyone pretends not to follow. There are moments of lightness, as always. At Carnival, police and criminals swap costumes, the rules of dress-up ended for a single night of mischief and laughter. On holiday, strict dress codes are relaxed. Even the most buttoned-up official might don a silly hat or garland of flowers. The uniform is both a mask and a promise, a way to say, "This is who I am, at least for today." As the light softens and uniforms are folded away for the night, you sense how deeply clothing shapes the world. A badge, a cloak, a simple sash. Each is a thread in the fabric of community and memory. Whether you crave belonging or long to stand apart, the uniform is a powerful spell, one that can be wielded, feared, rejected, or reclaimed. And as you drift onward, you carry the quiet certainty that sometimes, to wear the same thing as everyone else is the most extraordinary act of all. You drift from the parade of uniforms, the hush of order and discipline lingering behind you, and step softly into a realm where the real magic of clothing is in what it's made from. Here, the fabric itself tells stories of power, longing, innovation, and envy. Every fold and seam whispers the tale of silk, wool, linen, and the rise of synthetics. The textures beneath your fingertips carry the weight of kingdoms and the secrets of alchemists. You feel how, before anyone even sees your colour or cut, the fabric alone can make you untouchable, or leave you scrambling for respect. There is something sensual in the first sweep of silk across your skin. You imagine yourself in a dim-lit chamber, a merchant holding up shimmering bolts imported from the far side of the world. For centuries, silk was so precious that it travelled the ancient trade routes guarded by soldiers and thieves alike. To own it was to own a piece of magic. Each thread the legacy of patient silkworms, careful hands, and distant mysterious empires. There are tales of Chinese princesses smuggling silkworm eggs out of their homeland in their hair or their walking sticks, braving death for the promise of a fortune in cloth. The texture of power is real. Kings and queens hoard the finest silk and velvet, refusing even their closest nobles the right to wear certain weaves. In some eras, the penalty for wearing royal fabric without permission is jail, ruin, or exile. You see the pride of a courtier allowed just a few inches of velvet trim, the envy in every glance. There are whispers that a single bolt of cloth once started a war, a queen demanding a rare purple for her coronation, a rival empire vowing never to allow the secret out. Historians still argue whether the chase for precious fabric truly changed the fates of nations, or whether these tales are embroidered by time and longing. Wool, too, is more than it seems. You see shepherds tending their flocks on wind-blown hills, the rough warmth of their cloaks holding back cold and rain. In medieval Europe, the wool trade builds cities, funds cathedrals, and pays for armies. Merchants become kings, towns rise from nothing on the back of a single sturdy fibre. The English Parliament debates the price of wool with more passion than any war or royal marriage. There are jokes that a well-made woolen coat is the real crown of the kingdom. Linen, the child of earth and water, is the quiet, everyday hero. You feel its cool smoothness, its clean, sturdy drape. For most people, linen shirts and shifts are the closest thing to comfort in a harsh world. It is strong enough for sails and ropes, fine enough for the most delicate undergarments. In Egypt, linen is a symbol of purity, wrapped around the dead to carry them into the afterlife. In the monasteries of Europe, monks weave their own linen, believing that clean cloth brings them closer to God. Sometimes, a family's entire fortune is stored in a chest of freshly spun sheets, embroidered with initials and hope. Quirky customs sprout from the world of fabric. In some villages, the first shirt a bride weaves for her husband is a silent vow. The tighter the weave, the stronger the love. In Japan, indigo-dyed cotton becomes the uniform of farmers and artisans, its deep blue a mark of honest work. And in Renaissance Italy, nobles compete to see who can drape themselves in the heaviest brocade, even as the summer heat turns their banquets into a test of endurance. Yet fabric is also a battleground. The arrival of new textiles is met with suspicion and excitement. When the first cotton from India arrives in Europe, the wealthy scoff. Too soft, too plain, too foreign. But the poor embrace it. Easy to wash, quick to dry, cheap enough for everyone. Soon factories spring up, fortunes rise and fall, and the world's idea of luxury shifts beneath your feet. There are riots as traditional weavers lose work, protests as new machines replace old hands. Historians still debate whether the birth of mass textiles set people free or bound them to a new kind of servitude. Synthetics change everything again. The first time you touch rayon, nylon, polyester, you feel a faint thrill. So smooth, so strong, so unlike anything grown in the earth. Advertisements promise a future where clothes never wrinkle, never fade, never stain. Nylon stockings are so coveted during wartime that women draw fake seams on their legs, hoping to fool the world, and maybe themselves, into believing they can keep up with the latest trend. There are rumours of secret hoards, of black market trades in stockings, of friendships made and lost over a single pair. But new fabrics breed new anxieties. Some worry that synthetics are unnatural, a sign of a world moving too fast. Old-timers mutter about lost skills, about the soul of cloth disappearing in the hum of machines. You hear debates over breathability, over static, over the sound a dress makes as it swishes through a crowded room. Historians still argue whether the march of innovation is progress or a kind of forgetting. Every texture is a code. The poor turn flour sacks into dresses, embroidering them with careful flowers and initials. The rich commission custom-woven cloth, their names hidden in the very thread. There are stories of families sewing precious coins into hems, of secret messages woven into banners carried into battle. Sometimes, a rebel's whole life hangs on a single thread, an invisible pocket sewn from scraps, a hidden pouch for a message or a jewel. There are tales of disaster too. In Victorian London, crinolines made of stiff horsehair and steel catch fire, sending panicked women rushing from the ballroom. In America, dresses dyed with early synthetics disintegrate in the rain, leaving their wearers blushing and exposed. In the courts of France, a nobleman's silk coat is so finely spun that it tears at a jealous rival's slightest tug, sparking laughter and scandal in equal measure. The world's love affair with fabric is sometimes a story of heartbreak. Odd rituals emerge. In the Scottish Highlands, families bring out their best tartan only for funerals or weddings, believing that the pattern links them to ancestors and lost kin. In India, The sari becomes both armour and celebration, each fold and pleat telling a different story, of harvest, of marriage, of loss. In the freezing winters of Russia, fur-trimmed coats are tokens of survival, their owners swapping tales of snowstorms and bears around crackling fires. You sense how much longing is spun into cloth, a child's first blanket worn thin with love, a soldier's scarf patched and repatched, tucked into a pocket for luck. Lovers exchanging handkerchiefs, weaving hopes and fears into every knot. There are tales of wedding veils carried for generations, yellowing but cherished, a link between daughters and mothers. Sometimes fabric becomes resistance. In times of occupation, oppressed peoples wear band patterns, smuggle forbidden dyes, or turn their coats inside out as a quiet protest. In factories, workers stitch secret symbols into uniforms, a red thread here, a blue patch there. There are stories of spies passing messages in embroidered borders, of queens hiding jewels in the folds of their skirts. In modern times, the world of fabric is both overwhelming and full of possibility. You wander through endless racks of choices: stretch, shimmer, breathability, warmth, the texture of comfort, the fantasy of power, the promise of standing out or blending in. You marvel at how, even now, fabric is the first decision you make each day, the secret shield or invitation you carry into the world. You find humour too. The tale of the actor whose costume split mid-performance, of the nobleman whose cloak unravelled behind him as he strode through the city, blissfully unaware. The farmer's wife who patched her apron so many times it became more patch than cloth. A map of hard years and private victories. In every world, the fabric of life is stitched with laughter, necessity and stubbornness. And always there is pride. A tailor running their fingers over the final seam. A bride tracing the lace on her wedding dress. A child marvelling at the smoothness of silk or the softness of flannel. The love of cloth is universal, ancient and new all at once. You leave this room trailing 1,000 textures behind you. Soft, rough, slippery, warm. The memory of silk on your skin, of wool at your throat, of linen in the morning sun. Every step, every movement, every gentle fold and crease is a reminder that fashion is not just what you wear, but what you dream, what you remember, what you dare to make from the world's endless store of possibility. You pass softly from the world of texture and weave, each step bringing you deeper into the realm of accessories that quietly declare war and peace, fortune and desire. Belts, bustles, and every strange contraption ever used to shape or bind the human body. They seem almost innocent at first glance. Yet as you draw closer, you sense their secret weight. These aren't mere ornaments. They are signals, signposts, weapons of love, and sometimes chains. You run your fingers along the supple leather of a belt coiled on a vanity. It's a plain thing, yet you feel the centuries of meaning behind it. For some, a belt is a badge of office, thick and heavy, decorated with the crests of knights or the insignia of armies. For others, it's a quiet sign of coming of age, the first time a boy is given a belt to replace childhood ties, or the ribbon a girl trades for a practical sash as she leaves her nursery behind. In the hands of the wealthy, a belt is jewelled, knotted, a statement of taste. For the poor, it might be the only thing holding their world together, literally and figuratively. There are rules here, as strict as any court ceremony. In medieval Europe, sumptuary laws decide who may wear gold buckles, whose sashes may drag the floor, whose girdles are lined with silver bells. The wrong belt on the wrong body is more than a faux pas. It can mean exile, disgrace, or worse. You sense the tension as you watch a young woman tighten her embroidered belt before a feast, her movements precise and deliberate. In this world, a single accessory can change your fate. Bustles, meanwhile, are almost comic in their ambition. You see the first ones, simple pads tied beneath skirts, meant to add a gentle curve, but the fashion grows wilder, swelling to impossible proportions. Soon the silhouette of a woman is transformed. Narrow waist, sudden arch, a sweeping cascade of fabric that requires its own kind of choreography just to sit down. Historians still argue whether bustles were a true mark of status or simply the fever dream of designers with too much fabric and not enough restraint. Some say the craze began when a single duchess wanted to hide a stain at a ball and improvised with a cushion. Others insist it was the result of industrial advances, the sudden ability to construct shapes never before possible. For those outside the fashion capitals, bustles are sometimes objects of ridicule. Village wits stuff theirs with hay, make parodies at harvest festivals, or race to see whose bustle can balance the most apples. But for those within the high walls of society, the stakes are real. A woman with the wrong shape, too small, too large, too outdated, might as well announce herself an outsider. Mothers fret, daughters sigh, and dressmakers mutter quietly as they measure, pad and repad, always chasing the ever-shifting ideal. Accessories become lines drawn in the sand. The belt or bustle you wear tells the world where you fit. Young or old, married or single, rich or desperate to appear so. In some families, an 18-inch waist is a marriage prospect. A girl who can be laced tightly enough might secure a future among the gentry, while those who cannot, or will not, are quietly passed over. You sense the pressure in every movement, the tug of a corset string, the careful placement of a bow, the desperate prayers that the stitches will hold through the night. Yet these objects are also tools of agency. There are stories of women sewing small pockets into their bustles, hiding coins or love notes or even the keys to a locked room. A girl in trouble might loosen her belt, sending a secret message to a friend across the room. At dances, clever partners learn to read the code, a hand resting lightly on a sash, a bow untied just so, a subtle shift in the tilt of a belt buckle. Historians still debate how universal these signals were, whether everyone understood or only the bravest dared to send them. You find belts that are more than just fastenings. In times of danger, a thick belt can hold a dagger or a flask of brandy. Some are lined with hidden compartments, places to tuck away contraband or precious stones. There are rumours of highwaymen whose belts are sewn with gold coins, making them nearly invincible, or at least impossible to rob. In royal courts, the right belt is a symbol of power, sometimes passed down through generations as a talisman, sometimes torn away in disgrace. Quirky traditions flourish. In parts of Eastern Europe, a new bride receives a ceremonial belt from her mother-in-law, a silent promise of unity and the hope for many children. In Scotland, clan belts are stamped with ancient symbols, worn for luck and for loyalty. Some belts are designed never to be untied in public, a mark of modesty or a clever way to keep secrets safe. You watch the rise and fall of other accessories, each with its own moment of glory and humiliation. The farthingale, a predecessor to the bustle, stretches skirts out wide enough to block a doorway, forcing people to bow or step aside. The chatelaine, a cluster of chains worn at the waist, marks out women of power and responsibility, jangling with keys, scissors, tiny notepads. There are stories of chatelaines being used as weapons, swung at would-be thieves or rude children. In some towns, to be without one is to announce yourself a guest, a stranger, or worse, someone with nothing to lose. Accessories are markers of gender and class, but sometimes they are also acts of rebellion. In the Roaring Twenties, women toss away bustles and corsets in favour of slim belts and loose dresses, shocking their elders and thrilling themselves. In revolutionary Paris, red sashes are worn as political statements, tightened and loosened with every turn of fortune. During hard times, belts are tightened, literally, as families scrimp and save. The phrase, "tighten your belt," becomes both a joke and a grim reality. You notice too the bittersweet ritual of outgrowing an old accessory. The belt or sash from childhood is put away, sometimes passed on to a younger sibling, sometimes hidden in a memory box. There are stories of widows who keep their late husbands' belts, tucking away small mementos in the folds. The world of belts and bustles is filled with both loss and longing, every knot a memory, every bow a hope. Sometimes the lines blur between necessity and extravagance. There are rumours of a countess who wore a belt so encrusted with jewels it weighed more than her gown, of a shop girl who fashioned a bustle out of newspapers to sneak into a masquerade. In the ballrooms of Vienna, the game is to see who can create the most outlandish silhouette, the bustles growing larger and larger until, inevitably, someone crashes into a table or collapses from laughter. The memory of these moments lingers long after the party's end. Historians still debate whether these accessories liberated or restricted those who wore them. Some argue that the focus on tiny waists and padded hips forced people into impossible ideals. Others claim that clever hands always found ways to subvert and play with the rules. What's certain is that each belt, bustle and bow is more than decoration. It's a story, a negotiation, sometimes a battle. Every day, people dress and arm themselves for the world, choosing what to reveal and what to conceal. You walk past mirrors and wardrobes crowded with these tokens of identity. You hear the soft rustle of silk sashes, the muted clang of a chatelaine, the sigh as someone lets out their belt at the end of a long night. Each accessory is a conversation with the body, where it can move, where it must hold back, where it dares to break free. And at last, you understand. The real art of fashion is not just in the grand gestures, but in the small secret negotiations. The belt you tighten to feel strong, the bustle you pad to be seen, the ribbon you tie for luck or love. Every accessory is a choice, a whisper or a shout, a way to say, I am here and I matter, even if only to yourself. You slip quietly from the world of belts, bustles and shifting silhouettes and into a chamber of sparkling shadows and whispered superstition, a place where jewellery glimmers not just with wealth, but with meaning. Here, amulets, brooches, rings and lockets are more than ornament. They are storytellers, warnings, charms, and even acts of defiance. Each piece is a riddle you can hold, a bit of history clinking softly at your throat or glinting on your finger. You run your fingers along a strand of beads, amber perhaps, warm and old as resinous honey. For centuries such beads have been worn for protection as much as for beauty. You remember stories of children given coral necklaces to ward off sickness, of soldiers tying simple pendants around their necks before battle. In every culture, people hang hope around their throats, a tiny cross, a crescent moon, a stone marked by time or prayer. There are whispers that the first jewellery ever made was not for display but for safety. The earliest talismans carried to shield the heart and soul. Mainstream history tells of crowns and sceptres, jewels mounted for kings and queens, their value measured in carats and coin. But you see the smaller things too. The ring passed down through generations, worn thin and bright by countless hands. You see brooches that fasten not just cloaks but secrets, pins that signal political allegiance, lockets that hold a single curl of hair or a secret portrait. You sense that jewellery, even more than clothing, carries the private heart of the wearer. You catch the scent of old metal and perfume, sense the ghosts of lost loves in every locket. There are stories of lovers exchanging rings cut from tin or even carved from bone, tokens too humble for thieves but precious beyond measure. Some say that rings worn on certain fingers can influence fate, a ruby on the left hand for courage, a sapphire on the right for clarity. In some towns, mothers sew tiny bells onto children's clothing to keep away evil spirits. In others, widows pin black jet brooches close to their hearts, a silent mourning that outlasts words. There are, of course, jewels made for power. The signet ring, bearing a family crest or mark, is more than decoration. It seals letters, commands armies, and opens doors. To lose such a ring is to risk not just embarrassment, but ruin. There are tales of rings stolen or forged, entire fortunes gained and lost by the twist of a finger. In the courts of Europe, you see ministers and monarchs passing secret messages hidden beneath a cabochon or smuggling poison in a hollowed gemstone. Historians still argue whether the most infamous rings, like the supposed Borgia poison ring, were ever truly used or simply inventions of a paranoid age. Brooches too have their codes. In the Scottish Highlands, the clan brooch fastens a tartan and marks out family and loyalty. In Victorian England, the language of flowers is worked into jewellery. A brooch of pansies for "think of me," a necklace of forget-me-nots for everlasting love. There's a fringe tidbit about a Parisian anarchist who wore a black enamel brooch shaped like a bomb, a silent dare to the authorities. In Russia, Fabergé eggs glitter on delicate chains, their intricate patterns meant to ward off misfortune and display impossible wealth. You notice how jewellery travels through life and death. In some cultures, babies receive a silver spoon or bangle at birth, a promise of fortune to come. Brides are draped in gold and pearls, each layer a wish or a warning. Even in death, jewellery follows, amulets tucked into shrouds, rings buried with the dead, sometimes stolen by grave robbers and sent back into circulation, carrying their ghosts with them. Historians still debate whether these customs were more about love or fear, or simply a refusal to let go of the past. There are odd tales of cursed gems, stones that bring ruin to their owners, or brooches so unlucky that families pass them on to distant cousins rather than keep them in the house. The Hope Diamond, the Black Orloff, and other legendary jewels gather dark stories like dust. Yet for every cursed stone, there are a dozen cherished ones. A grandmother's pendant worn for every exam, a lucky earring saved for first dates, a ring that seems to glow warmer when worn by the right person. In times of trouble, jewellery becomes resistance. During wars and occupations, families hide their wealth in plain sight, melting down gold to make buttons, sewing pearls into hems, braiding coins into their hair. There are stories of women in occupied France who passed coded messages in the patterns of their beaded necklaces, or of enslaved people in America who braided seeds and gold dust into their children's hair before a journey into the unknown. Jewellery in these moments is both hope and survival. You see too how jewellery can divide as much as unite. In many places and times, sumptuary laws dictate who can wear what. Pearls for the rich, copper for the poor, nothing but glass for outsiders. The wrong earring, the wrong brooch, is enough to attract suspicion or even violence. There's a tale from Tudor England of a merchant's wife who dares to wear a necklace of real pearls, only to be denounced by her neighbours and stripped of her finery. In some cases, the greatest crime is simply to shine too brightly. Odd customs appear everywhere. In Italy, children are given small horns made of coral to wear against the evil eye. In India, women pierce their noses and ears with gold, the act a rite of passage as much as a statement of wealth. In Poland, men wear silver rings set with garnets to signal bravery. In Mexico, milagros, tiny silver charms, are pinned to clothes or hung from necklaces, each one a prayer for healing or luck. There are stories of rings thrown into wells for wishes, of bracelets broken and hidden as a sign of grief or shame. Quirky tales surface in quieter corners. In Victorian England, mourning jewellery becomes an entire industry. Lockets filled with hair, rings engraved with names and dates, jet beads strung into heavy necklaces. Some widows wear these tokens for years, others only for show. There are tales of men who keep a secret locket sewn into their waistcoat, opening it only at night when the world is quiet. In one French village, a baker's daughter wears a necklace of tiny bread charms, each one a reminder of home. Jewellery is about longing as much as pride. You see lovers exchanging mismatched earrings, friends giving bracelets woven from scraps of ribbon, mothers whispering old blessings as they fasten a chain around a child's neck. Sometimes the value of a piece is in the memory, not the metal. A bead found on a beach, a ring made from wire and glass. Historians still debate whether jewellery is more about showing off or holding on, but everyone agrees. The smallest stone can carry the greatest weight. You notice too how jewellery is a weapon of flirtation. In grand salons, women fan themselves with jewelled combs, letting the light catch and dance across the room. A single glance at a brooch can start a rumour. A glimpse of an ankle chain can invite or repel. There are stories of secret lovers passing rings back and forth during dances, of rivals exchanging barbed compliments about each other's charming little trinkets. The language of jewellery is quick, subtle, and endlessly inventive. And yet, for all the codes and caution, jewellery remains a pleasure, sometimes the only beauty people can claim as their own. You watch a grandmother polish her beads in the evening light, humming a song that her mother taught her. You see a child twisting a bright ring on their finger, dreaming of the future. In every era, every place, people mark themselves with gold, glass, bone, and stone. A promise, a warning, a hope that something small and beautiful can make all the difference. You leave the glittering chamber with fingers still tingling, the echo of 100 stories jangling at your wrist. Jewellery, you realise, is history in miniature, a way to be remembered, to belong, to bless, to provoke, to dare. And in the quietest moments, a ring or a locket pressed close is a reminder that everyone, everywhere, has a story to hold on to. You slip out from the chamber of glinting jewels into a hallway dim with candlelight, shadows flickering along the walls. Here, masks and veils whisper, and the power to vanish or transform is suddenly within reach. The atmosphere thickens, charged with secrets. With every step you sense the peculiar alchemy of concealment, the thrill of hiding, the possibility of seeing and not being seen. It is a landscape as ancient as myth, but as intimate as breath against silk. You reach for a mask, feel the cool curve of porcelain or leather, the tickle of velvet ribbons meant to tie it tight. In the distant corners of memory, you recall the grand masquerades of Venice. Gilded masks, feathers rising like flames, the city transformed into a dream where status, gender and history slip from the shoulders like a discarded cloak. For a night, anyone can be anyone. A countess becomes a street hawker, a beggar becomes a prince. The rules dissolve, and so does the fear of breaking them. There's power in anonymity. You watch as people glide through the ballroom, every gesture more daring because it's hidden. A masked glance can be an invitation, a warning, a riddle. The right mask allows its wearer to say what they cannot with their face: sarcasm, boldness, even love. Sometimes the most dangerous truths slip out when no one can tell who is speaking. In the hush of the crowd, you sense the thrill. Tonight, nobody knows you, and you can be braver, wilder, softer than ever before. But masks are more than party tricks. You see them in sacred rituals: the high priest in a sun mask, the dancer with a wolf's snarl carved from wood. These masks summon ancestors, gods, and dreams. In West Africa, ceremonial masks bring the community together. In Japan, the delicate no mask turns an actor into a spirit. There's always a space for transformation, for stories that need a layer of mystery. Veils offer their own kind of magic. You see brides lifting a gossamer veil, their faces shining with hope and nerves. Mourners draw thick veils down, hiding tears from the world. In the courts of Byzantium and Persia, elaborate veils are both a sign of status and a shield against prying eyes. Sometimes the veil is freedom, the power to choose when to reveal or retreat. Sometimes it is a prison, a layer between the self and the world. Historians still debate whether veiling empowered or confined, or if the answer changed with the intent of the wearer. A fringe story shivers at the edge of the dance. In Paris during the Reign of Terror, women wore red ribbons as necklaces to masked balls, veiled in black as a grim joke about the guillotine. At the same time, others donned half-masks and veils, not just for fun, but as a way to survive the chaos. Hidden identities meant safety, or at least a chance to slip away if things turned violent. There are veils of celebration too. In India, the bridal veil, ghunghat, is both tradition and flirtation, a way to draw out the moment of revelation. In some Mediterranean villages, a bride's face is hidden with a net of coins, each one jingling with a wish or blessing. In Victorian England, a widow's veil is thick and black, worn for months or even years, a sign of grief, but also a curtain between her and unwanted advances. The symbolism of the veil is never simple. Sometimes it is power, sometimes it is loneliness, sometimes both at once. you notice how masks and veils play with gender and identity. At a Venetian carnival, men dress as women, women as men, both freed by anonymity. In Shakespeare's comedies, a veil or mask is all it takes for a character to step outside the lines of expectation, to court danger or love, to find out what is real by pretending for a while. Historians still argue whether such performances changed the world or simply offered a night's escape for those bold enough to seize it. There is a darker side. In many places and times, masks and veils are forced upon the other, criminals, lepers, outcasts, so the world can forget their faces. Yet the power to vanish can be claimed, not just imposed. There are stories of women slipping out into the night, veiled and nameless, for a taste of freedom. Some tales tell of masked rebels striking at tyrants, melting back into the crowd, their faces never known. You see veils as shields against desire too. In medieval courts, ladies flutter fans or half-lift veils to send signals, to encourage or rebuff admirers. In the harems of Istanbul, veils are as much about mystery as about modesty. There are tales of lovers who meet in secret, faces hidden behind silk, confessions whispered through a barrier of lace. The veil is as much invitation as it is denial. Masks appear at the margins of resistance and protest. In 17th century England, Guy Fawkes masks become a symbol of rebellion. First worn at bonfires, later at protests and secret meetings. In the 20th and 21st centuries, the same mask re-emerges, a signal that sometimes the most powerful weapon is a hidden face. Historians still debate whether the mask makes the person braver, or just allows them to act without fear of consequence. Quirky customs flourish. In some alpine villages, masked processions drive away winter spirits, their faces grotesque or comical. In New Orleans, Mardi Gras is a carnival of masks and mystery, where identities shift with every bead tossed and song sung. There's a story from Venice of a woman who wore the same mask every year for decades, never revealing her name, until one night she danced alone in the piazza and vanished, leaving only a whisper behind. Even outside of parties and rituals, the urge to hide and transform never fades. You see children playing with bedsheet veils and painted cardboard masks, inventing new worlds with each flutter and grin. In times of war, spies don false noses and moustaches, slip through borders with veiled faces, trust their lives to the power of not being seen. The mask and the veil are tools of survival, as well as delight. And sometimes the greatest transformation comes from removing the mask. There are stories of lovers who, after years of secrecy, finally lift the veil and find each other in the daylight. Friends who meet at masked balls and, recognizing a laugh or a gesture, decide to trust what is real. The moment of unveiling is always charged. Relief, fear, hope, disappointment. To reveal a face, to say, "This is me truly," is perhaps the bravest act of all. You sense too that in every society there are debates over what should be hidden and what should be shown. There are laws, rules, taboos, sometimes written, sometimes whispered. The meaning of a mask or a veil is never fixed. For some it is safety, for others a prison. For some it is rebellion, for others submission. For everyone it is possibility. You pause, letting the candlelight catch on the silver edge of a mask, the delicate shimmer of a veil. In the hush, you realize that the art of hiding is not about vanishing, but about choosing when and how to appear. The world beyond the veil is vast, and sometimes the only way to find your true face is to try on 100 others along the way. You wander from the shadows of veils and masks into the realm of fastenings, closures, and the artful technology of keeping clothing together or keeping it secret. Buttons, hooks, laces, pins, and hidden fasteners wait for your touch, unassuming yet quietly revolutionary. It's here you begin to sense how the smallest detail, an ordinary clasp or knot, can tip the balance between belonging and exclusion, luxury and hardship, safety and exposure. You reach for a row of buttons on an old velvet coat. Each one is a world, carved from horn, bone, or shell, cast in pewter, wrapped in silk or delicately painted with a family crest. Buttons, you realise, have never just been about utility. They're tokens, charms, codes, and sometimes sly jokes. You recall a story from Regency England of a tailor so famous for his cunning button designs that rival houses tried to bribe his apprentices for the secret. Some say he hid tiny mirrors in the backs of his buttons, allowing the wearer to check their hair or spot a rival without ever turning around. Before buttons, there were brooches and pins, simple, sharp, and sometimes deadly. In ancient Rome, fibulae, ornate pins, fastened togas and cloaks, each one declaring status and allegiance. You can almost hear the clink of a pin falling to the marble floor, the sharp intake of breath as a senator leans to retrieve it. There are tales of spies concealing poison-tipped pins in their sleeves, of lovers sending messages by the colour of a brooch. Even the humble safety pin, a modern invention, carries echoes of this old magic, a bit of bent wire that holds together not just fabric but whole lives. Hooks and laces are another story. You run your fingers along the eyelets of a corset, feel the memory of tension in every crisscrossed string. Lacing is both art and ordeal. In the Renaissance, men and women lace sleeves and doublets with bright ribbons, turning every outfit into a canvas. In 19th century ballrooms, the morning ritual of lacing is an act of trust, requiring patience, strength, and sometimes a friend's steady hand. Historians still argue whether lacing was more about beauty or control, but everyone remembers the sigh of relief when the knots finally loosen at night. Fastenings can be loaded with symbolism. The way a cloak is clasped, the choice of pin or buckle, the tightness of a bow, all of these send signals, sometimes louder than words. In some courts, the right buttonhole is a mark of favour. In others, an open clasp is a scandal. There's a story from 18th century Vienna of a duchess whose accidentally undone button sent her suitor into such a fluster that he proposed on the spot. In Turkey, a sash tied in a special knot is a sign of mourning. In Japan, the way an obi is fastened marks the wearer's status and intent. Quirky traditions abound. In Scotland, brides sew a button from their father's coat into their dress for luck. In Italy, superstitious mothers knot red ribbons around their baby's wrists to ward off the evil eye. During the Napoleonic Wars, soldiers wear their coats buttoned the wrong way to show defiance, confusing enemy snipers who look for a familiar silhouette. Even in the modern world, the ritual of buttoning a school uniform, tying a tie, or pinning on a badge is a daily spell, a way to become, just for a moment, the person you want or need to be. You notice the ingenuity of closures in times of hardship. In war or poverty, when buttons are scarce, people improvise. Bits of string, sharpened thorns, even coins pressed into service. Children grow up learning how to tie clever knots. Women collect odd buttons in tins, hoping to match them to future coats or shirts. There's a quiet pride in a well-mended garment, in making do, in passing down a favourite fastener from mother to daughter, father to son. The button itself has an odd place in history, sometimes the mark of luxury, sometimes the badge of necessity. In the Middle Ages, buttons are imported, costly and reserved for the rich. By the 19th century, with the rise of factories and mass production, buttons become democratised. Everyone can fasten their own clothing, adjust their fit, or add a flourish. Yet, even now, the right button can set a garment apart, catch the eye, hint at a story. There are secret codes in fastenings. In some military uniforms, the number of buttons signals rank or regiment. In secret societies, members fasten their cloaks with hidden pins, known only to fellow initiates. In the ballrooms of Paris, a clever touch to a buttonhole might signal, "Meet me at midnight," while in a London gambling den, a certain colour of cufflink means cheat at your own risk. Historians still debate how much was truly encoded and how much was playful rumour, but every button and pin feels laden with possibility. Odd mishaps and humour linger around fastenings too. The tale of the mayor whose breeches split at a banquet, the sound of popping buttons silencing the room, the infamous wardrobe malfunction at a royal wedding. memorialised in paintings and gossip for years. Children boast of button battles, seeing who can find the brightest, biggest or oddest specimen. In the countryside, farmers use bits of coloured yarn as both closure and decoration, winding their lives into every garment. Yet closures can wound as much as they comfort. The tight fastenings of a straitjacket, the locked buttons of a prisoner's uniform, the protective knots that mark out those deemed dangerous or other. There are stories of lovers forcibly separated, their last gesture the return of a borrowed pin or the snip of a ribbon. In these moments, the technology of clothing becomes a language of longing and loss. At the edge of celebration, fastenings are tokens of luck and memory. A buttonhole flower at a wedding, a charm bracelet clasped before a journey, a ribbon tied in a child's hair on the first day of school. In some cultures, the lucky button is passed around at family gatherings, each person making a wish as they touch it. There's an old superstition that finding a button on the street brings good fortune, especially if you sew it on with a thread from your own clothing. You see how fastenings evolve with time. The zipper, a modern marvel, arrives with a promise of ease. No more fumbling, no more patience required. Suddenly clothing changes. Dresses get shorter, boots tighter, pockets deeper. There's excitement, but also nostalgia. A sense that something subtle has been lost, that the slow rituals of lacing and buttoning connected people to their garments, and to each other. Still, new fastenings inspire new mischief. There are tales of zippers that stick at the worst possible moment, of ties that knot too tight, of children who master every closure except the one that matters most. The world's wardrobes are filled with half-button shirts, mismatched cufflinks, safety pins keeping secrets safe. You sense the eternal dance between order and chaos, between the neat, satisfying click of a fastener and the wildness that always threatens to undo it. You linger in a dressing room, the mirror reflecting your image multiplied by 100. You watch your fingers, slow, careful, sometimes clumsy, as you fasten a row of buttons, tie a bow, slip a pin through a lapel. Each gesture is a kind of magic, a way of drawing together the scattered pieces of a day or a life. And as you step out, you carry with you the quiet confidence of a clasp well fastened, a knot well tied, a story securely held, at least until it's time to let go. You slip from the world of closures, the gentle snap of a button or the firm pull of a lace echoing in your memory, and now you find yourself at the crossroads of meaning and myth, where everything you've worn, carried, and hidden is more than cloth and leather, more than gold or silk. Here, in the quietest hour of night, you begin to understand. The things people put on their bodies are not just for show or shelter, but for magic, memory, and the eternal longing to be seen, to belong, to matter. You walk into a chamber heavy with memory, an attic maybe, or a great hall after the revellers have gone. The garments you've traced tonight hang from beams and hooks, top hats lined in lavender, corsets and bustles resting limp as old dreams, capes folded on chairs, gloves and shoes left at the foot of a narrow bed. In the hush, every item feels alive, humming with the warmth and hope of its last owner. You sense the presence of those who wore these things, not just their bodies, but their hearts. There's a soldier's coat, the lining patched with a scrap from a lover's dress, a tiny button hidden in the hem. There's a bride's veil, still scented faintly with orange blossom and fear. There's the battered cap of a street child, the brim chewed and greasy, and a child's woolen mittens, strung together by a faded ribbon and hung on a peg. Every item has been both shield and signal, both burden and banner. You realise, as you look closer, that the rituals of getting dressed are rarely just about utility. In every era, in every class, people invest clothing with meaning and ritual. There's the superstition of putting your left shoe on first for luck, of always wearing blue on journeys, of tucking rosemary or lavender into a pocket to ward off bad spirits. Sometimes the logic is lost, but the comfort remains. You linger by a long mirrored dressing table scattered with pins, ribbons and faded perfume bottles. Imagine a mother helping her daughter tie her first sash for a festival, a nervous youth straightening his collar before a job interview, an old woman fingering the beads of her wedding necklace, half remembering a song from long ago. The repetition, the smoothing, tying, adjusting, and checking becomes a private prayer, a way of preparing not just the body but the spirit for whatever lies ahead. You remember how clothes have shaped the boundaries of self, the armour that gives a knight the courage to ride into battle, the nurse's white apron that brings comfort to the sick, the ceremonial robe that marks the priest as holy. Even the most ordinary clothes can transform the wearer. You sense how a favourite sweater can be a kind of armour against loneliness, how a pair of lucky socks can make the world seem brighter, how a hat tipped just so can summon the confidence to speak or flirt or simply keep going. But clothing isn't only about who you are, it's about who you want to be and who you might become. A child tries on a parent's shoes, a student borrows a friend's scarf, a bride steps into a dress worn by generations before her. Each act is both imitation and hope, a rehearsal for a new chapter, a silent promise that you too might be strong, beautiful, brave, or lucky. You notice how, in every time and place, people use clothing to communicate things they cannot say. The black ribbon for mourning, the white flower for peace, the red sash for revolution, the yellow star for survival, the green kerchief for hope. Historians still argue whether these symbols change the world or merely reflect its struggles, but you sense that each gesture, however small, carries a force that ripples outward. There are quiet acts of defiance too, a girl sewing a secret pocket into her skirt, a boy slipping a band ribbon into his cap, a mother braiding a lock of her own hair into a soldier's jacket before he goes to war. These are the things no law can erase, the memories no ruler can forbid. For every order to conform, there is a secret act of rebellion stitched into the seams. You smile at the memory of every time clothing has betrayed its wearer. Shoes lost in the mud, hats swept away by wind, bustles collapsing on the dance floor. There is humour in these mishaps, a gentle reminder that fashion is never entirely in our control. Yet even in disaster, the effort matters. To care for one's appearance, to hope for admiration or luck, or even just a moment's ease, is to claim a little dignity in a chaotic world. The final meaning of clothing, you sense, is not in the garment itself, but in the stories it collects. The laughter at a masked ball, the quiet pride of a uniform well worn, the longing of a lover clutching a faded glove, the courage stitched into every hidden pocket. These are the stories that make us human, the reminders that we are always both more and less than what we wear. The chamber grows quieter, the last candle guttering, the air sweet with memory. You think of all the hands, craftsmen and mothers, rebels and lovers, the careful and the clumsy, who shaped every garment, fastened every clasp, and whispered hope into every hem. The night grows softer, and you understand. The true magic of clothing is its power to gather memory, longing and hope, and to wrap them close to your skin as you move through the world. And maybe, just maybe, that's all anyone ever really needed. A way to feel a little less alone, a way to belong to the great, invisible fellowship of dreamers, warriors, makers, and survivors who came before. The night has grown so gentle now, softer than silk, the air turning slow and honeyed around you. The stories of hats, capes, corsets, and shoes drift like distant music, each one floating further, lighter, until they feel less like burdens and more like a gentle cloak drawn around your shoulders. Your breath slows as you remember the weight and comfort of old garments, the hush of fabric falling, the soft click of a button, the brush of a ribbon against your wrist. As you settle, let the memory of all these strange, beautiful inventions, each crafted by loving, clever, or desperate hands, linger just a little longer. Feel how the touch of cloth can bring comfort, how the smallest detail, an old shoe, a lucky bead, a worn mitten, can be an anchor in the sea of time. The world may turn and fashions may change, but the hope stitched into every seam endures, quiet and strong. Let your shoulders relax, your breath drift easy. The images of vanished markets and crowded ballrooms, of silken linings and sturdy belts, growing dim and calm in your mind. Imagine every story, every laugh, every loss, every secret pocket settling soft as dust, safe within you. You are held, you are remembered, you are part of this long, gentle parade. The world outside your window falls away. All that matters is this quiet space, the hush of history, and the promise that you too are wrapped in something old and comforting and kind.